You are listening to Claret Blue, an Aston Villa podcast brought to you by Birmingham Live.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Claret Blue Podcast. We keep these glorious guests rolling, don't we? The latest is Mr. John Gregory. How are you, John?
I'm very well indeed, Matt. Thank you. Good to see you.
I don't think I've actually given you the big build up there, because I normally introduce people as former favourite legends, and we know all that, don't we? That's taken as read, isn't it?
There's been a few legends at Aston Villa over the years. I saw Andy Gray on your programme a couple of weeks back, and he certainly was a man that deserved the title of legend. I had the luck of playing with him only for a short period, only for a couple of years, but he'd just won the Player of the Year, I think, the Young Player of the Year and the PFA's Player of the Year in 1977, and when I signed for Villa. So, yeah, he is absolutely a legend.
Well, that's a perfect segue, John, because we're going to kick off by talking about your career. So, am I right in thinking that your old man was a footballer before you?
Yeah, he was. My dad played for West Ham back in the 50s, early 50s. And obviously I was just brought up with watching football. I can remember watching the 1960 FA Cup final, Wolves versus Blackburn, 1960. And I think that was the first time that I really got the bug. I was 6 years old. And my dad obviously used to take me to matches. As a 6 or 7 year old, I would go with my dad every match. Usually kicking a ball around somewhere or other. So I was brought up with football, and I always carried a football. I took the football to bed, and it was at the end of my bed. And I remember waking up in the night, sort of just looking down at the bottom of the bed, making sure that the football was still there. So my whole life revolved around it. But yeah, I kind of saw Dad play, and I saw him then go into management, only sort of on a sort of lower football, United Counties League. He was involved with a team called St Neots up in Cambridgeshire, and he was the gaffer there for about 12, 13 years. And funnily enough, I played Walsall in the FA Cup in 1966. We lost 2-0 at Walsall, and that was the first time that St Neots had got to the FA Cup first round proper. And actually, since 1966, they've never ever appeared in the first round proper ever again. So Dad's had a good legacy at sort of non-league football level. But yeah, I was brought up in it, and obviously went to school, and I just lived and breathed football the whole time. I was just got out of lessons. I used to get out of lessons so I could go and pump up the footballs ready for the matches on Saturday morning at school and that. But yeah, so I kind of followed my dad, and obviously he was a bit of an inspiration to me. I wanted to try and emulate him and be as good as he was.
So was it kind of you who kind of fell in love with being around football and that scene and wanting to be like your dad, rather than your dad kind of being a pushy father who forced you into football, or a bit of both? Or?
Oh, listen, don't get me wrong. He bloody pushed me. He was my biggest enemy. On a Saturday morning, God, I hated it being there. He'd come to the school match, Saturday morning, and all the dads and mums and that used to stand along the touchline, and I used to look across to see if he'd turned up, and when I saw him stood there on the side of the pitch, I used to hate it, because I just knew that it'd be berating me for 80 minutes or however long the games used to last in those days. And so I hated him being there. He'd shout at me. Whatever I did was always the wrong thing. And he really gave me a really hard time. I could never seem to please him. So much so, Matt, that one week he wasn't there, and we lost 4-0. We lost 4-0 to a team called Ramsey. And they really beat us up that day. They beat us 4-0. And I went home, and I saw my dad in the afternoon. He said, "Oh, how did you get on this morning?" And I didn't have the heart to tell him that I'd lost 4-0, because I just knew that he would really sort of humiliate me and chastise me. And so I told him that we won 1-0, and he said, "Oh, that's good." He said, "Who scored?" I said, "I did. I scored a penalty." And we won 1-0. So he said, "Oh, okay, good." And then, of course, he went down the pub on Sunday and obviously saw all the other dads in the pub who all told him that, my dad's walked in and gone, "Oh, boys did well yesterday." And he said, "What do you mean they done well? They got battered." He said, "You're joking." And of course, my dad said that we'd won 1-0 and that my boy had scored the winner. And they said, he's winding you up. They lost 4-0. They were bloody useless, So, and he'd come home, and the abuse that I got then, was unbelievable. So I never lied to him again about the result, I have to say. But no, it was hard work. It was really hard work with Dad. He really made it really difficult for me as a kid, and I used to hate seeing him there. And when he wasn't there, Matt, I just was totally relaxed and enjoyed the game, and usually did okay. But when Dad was there, it was awful. So I kind of got used to it as I got older. Obviously, as I grew up and started playing professionally, he could shout as much as he wanted to up in the stand, and I wouldn't hear him. There was a lot of other people there. So no, he was my biggest critic. Really was. It really did give me a hard time as a kid.
Listen, without wishing to kind of, I don't know, excuse your dad, it did the trick to a point, because you got into professional football, you made your name at Northampton. So without me trying to rattle through that too quickly, what was your first experience like at Northampton, and how did the Villa thing first come about? Well,
Northampton, I obviously went as an apprentice footballer. They used to have apprenticeships in those days, like a two or 3 year apprenticeship. I was 15 years old and I signed for them. And I was pretty desperate by then. I think a few clubs had come to look at me and didn't fancy me, some big clubs like Premier League clubs back in the day that had a look and didn't fancy me at all. And I ended up, out of desperation, I got the chance to go for a trial at Northampton, and they wanted to take me. They wanted to sign me. They signed me as an apprentice, and I obviously worked and cleaned the boots and had a really good education. I have to say, it held me in good stead years later, because, as kids, we had to clean the boots, we had to clean the baths, we had to run up the shop and get sandwiches or food, or pump the balls up, help the groundsman on the pitch. We literally worked a 40-hour week, when the players all went home at lunchtime, that's when our real hard work started. So that was a really good education. I learned how to look after football boots. I was a boot boy, in charge of boots for a couple of years. Then managed to get in the first team when I was, I think I was 17, 18. I got in the first team, and I stayed in it for about 4 or 5 years. And then my mate at the time, who was a couple of years older than me, Philip Neal, suddenly went off to Liverpool, and he went to Liverpool for 60 grand, and I was absolutely gobsmacked that Liverpool would actually be watching a team in the 4th division, and Phil suddenly went off to Liverpool, and I think he really inspired me to think that, because I thought I'd be stuck at Northampton for the rest of my life. Phil went off to Liverpool, and I suddenly realised that, big clubs, Premier League clubs, will come to watch us every week. So I really sort of got my head down and started to work up a lot harder. And when I was 23, I got pulled in by the chairman to tell me that Villa had been interested in me, and they wanted me to go and have a trial. So me and Alan Evans was at Dunfermline, and I was obviously at Northampton, and the two of us, we had a trial. We had a week's trial at Bodymore, and we come and train with the first team. And this was my big chance. If I had a good week's training, there was a good chance that Villa would sign me, which of course they did. They signed both me and Alan that summer of '77. They just won the League Cup. Brian had just scored the winner at Old Trafford in the replay. And, I walked into a dressing room there where the likes of Brian Little, Andy Gray, Leighton Phillips, John Burridge, all these guys were sort of household names, and I'd only ever seen them on television, and suddenly I'm sharing a dressing room with them, and it was an amazing feeling for me to think that all those years I'd had at Northampton playing in the first, I played like almost 200 games, I think, for them over like a 5-year period. So I'd got a lot of games under my belt. I was fairly experienced in that respect, but obviously not at the Premier League level. And then, of course, I went that pre-season. That was my first pre-season under Ron Saunders. And it was hard work, mate, I have to tell you. Ron was a tough guy to work for, but he produced results, as you know. So it was a very exciting stage of my life, I have to say.
I think it was 40 grand. I think Villa paid for you. But in terms of you, do you get a signing on fee? What's the lifestyle like, John, for a top flight footballer who's 23 years old in 1977? We got a picture of you, first of all, that Dan's going to flash up. First of all, what's going on with that moustache? You look like Boise out of Only Fools and Horses, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah, exactly. I could sell a few cars in those days. I had to. Yeah, you can take it down now, thank you. I was on £50 a week at Northampton. £50 a week and probably £5 appearance. And Ron sat me down in his house. I went over to his house in Knowle to sign the contract. Alan Bennett was the company secretary. It was Tony Barton that had seen me. Tony Barton had seen both me and Alan play, but Ron hadn't seen us. That's why we went for the week's trial. But Ron then saw us. Obviously, wanted to sign us that summer. And I went to Ron's house to sign, and he doubled my salary. He put me on £100 a week, which was, for me, was just, it's like lottery money. And I think I got about £5,000 signing on fee that was spread over 3 years, something like that, about £1,500 a year, something like that, as a signing on fee. And suddenly I was rich. That was a real feeling of being rich. Ron was giving me an opportunity to establish myself and make myself sort of a permanent fixture in the team. So I really got my head down, and I just thought, well, you don't get chances like this very often. So I worked at it as hard as I could. And, I could run. I had a good engine. But you know what? I could never beat Frank Carridus in the cross country. I could beat John Burridge. John Burridge could run. So John Burridge immediately hated me because he always used to finish second behind Frank. Now he was finishing third behind both Frank and myself. But I could never catch Frank. Frank was unbelievable, his distance running. But I did okay. I could never beat him, but I could beat most of the others. And I think Ron quite liked me, the fact that I could run and I was fit and I was hungry still, and he hadn't paid a lot of money for me. And to be honest, Northampton were going to get another £25,000 if I played 25 matches. So they'd get a kick on. So obviously they wanted me to get in the team and clock up the appearances as quickly as I could. So they'd get another payday. And of course, I got another payday as well. I got another kickback sort of signing on fee, about another £1,000 or something, which, £1,000 to me was like £1 million today. So life changes. I never had a car. I never had a car at all until I signed for the Villa. And obviously with the extra money, extra salary, I was able to actually go and buy a car. For the first time, I was 23 years old. It's the first car I'd ever had. And I'd never been on a plane. I was 23 years old, and I don't think there's many 23-year-olds in the world today that have never been on an airplane. I've never been on a flight, ever. And we went off to Bilbao at the start of that season. That was the first time I'd ever been on a plane. And we flew to Bilbao to play in a pre-season tournament. And the gaffer, Ron, he hated flying, hated it. And he'd be supping his brandy, trying to calm himself down a bit. And I can remember him saying to me, Grego, he used to call me Grego. Grego, he said, "What do you like flying? Do you enjoy flying?" And I said, "Yeah, I love it. It's great. I've never been on a plane in my life." And he hated it. He was scared to death of planes. But yeah, that was the first time I'd ever been on a plane. I was 23 years old, and that kind of thing doesn't really happen these days to a 23-year-old footballer. So all these new things were coming to me, and it was very exciting, very enjoyable. And then suddenly sort of going out playing at Villa Park in front of, 35, 40,000 people that in itself was daunting. For me, I think the most I'd ever played in front of up until then was maybe 10, 12,000 people, in a fourth division game. So all these things were coming at me thick and fast, and I was enjoying every minute of it.
76 games or 76 appearances anyway, I think you made in 2 seasons, 11 goals. Did you quickly feel that you belong there?
Not the first season was I played one game, I might play 2, but I was just filling in for everybody in that first year, and I just literally if somebody was injured, I'd take his place. I had great versatility, and whenever Ron said to me, I want you to play left back today, I just said, yeah, no problem. My preferred position really was as a midfield player, but I couldn't establish myself there. We had Dennis Mortimer in the centre midfield, Frank Caritas, and they were, those guys were first choice every week. And I just filled in for everyone. And obviously back in those days, we only had one substitute. I often would be substitute. I would often not actually get on the field and play. Substitutes weren't used quite as much as they are today. Weeks went by, and I'd obviously play a few games in the reserves. I didn't play many games in the reserves, but Ron sort of kept me as the utility man. And as I said, I played right back, left back, centre midfield. I played midfield on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, and I was always willing to do that. And I could always do a sort of a decent job, I might not have been outstanding, but I could always do a decent job for the gaffer until sort of the preferred player got himself fit, and obviously he would then come straight back into the team. And the second season was a lot better. I became a little bit more established, and I really felt like a first choice in the second season. I think the second season I played 40 or 42 matches the second season, and Ron actually made me captain. Dennis Mortimer was injured for a couple of games, and he made me captain of the team ahead of people like Andy and Tommy Craig and Johnny Gidman and Brian Little and Frank Caritas, and he made me captain of the team for the couple of games. I think Morty was either suspended or injured. And I just wanted to play everywhere. And there's obviously the story of me wearing every outfield shirt, which I needed one shirt to complete the set. And that was Brian's number 8. I hadn't worn number 8 because obviously he wore it every week. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, we used to wear numbers from 1 to 11 in those days. You didn't have your name on the back, but you just wore numbers from 1 to 11. And I'd worn 9 outfield shirts. I'd worn the substitutes shirt as well. Not worn the goalkeeper's shirt, but I still needed number 8 to complete the set. And we played Liverpool at home on Easter Monday. They came to Villa Park on Easter Monday afternoon, 3:00 kickoff. And I wanted the number 8, and Brian was injured. He didn't play that day. So I said to the gaffer, I said to Dennis Mortimer, can you ask the gaffer for me if I can wear the number 8 today? And he said, no, I'm not asking him. You can bloody ask him. So I was shitting myself, actually. I didn't want to go and ask the gaffer because I thought it would be like him just to scrub my name off the team sheet completely and tell me to go home. So I kind of went up to him very sheepishly and asked him if I could wear the number 8 shirt today, because I said, boss, it's the only shirt I haven't worn, and I'd like to wear it to complete the set. And he just said, yeah, okay, no problem. And that was it. So I wore the number 8. I played centre half alongside Alan Evans, wearing the number 8 shirt on my back, and that kind of completed the set. And we won 3-1. I actually wore the number 9 shirt. I wore Andy's shirt. Andy's was the number 9. And the first game of 78 season, no, I beg your pardon, 78-79 season, the first game in August 98 was Wolves at home. Andy scored against Wolves, a club that obviously he was going to join a little bit later on, but he scored the only goal. We won 1-0 first home game, and he got injured in the game. And on the Wednesday night, we played at White Hart Lane, and Ozzy Ardiles and Ricky Villa were making their home debuts for Tottenham against us. nobody even mentioned the opposition in the build-up to the game. It was all about Ardiles, all about Ricky Villa, world champions they were. They just won the World Cup with Argentina. There was 40-odd thousand at White Hart Lane. We got the ticker tape welcome onto the pitch when the two teams come out. And no one even mentioned us. I'm sure people would have said at the time, who's it they're playing today? And someone said, I don't know. But it was us. We went there, and I got Andy's number 9 on playing up. I played up front. Me and Brian together up front, and we obviously beat them 4-1. It was an amazing result by us. I managed to score. Brian scored. Alan Evans scored, and a guy called Gary Shelton got the 4th for us, and we won 4-1 at White Hart Lane, and that was a really special night, special occasion. And as I said, I wore Andy's number 9 shirt. I'm sure that I think it was the shirt actually that helped me more than anything. I think it did something. It turned me into a striker, that number 9. But yeah, so that was a very special night and a special time. So, that season was, as I say, it was very good for me, and I look back on it with fond memories. And to be honest, I just thought everything was cushy. I just thought, I'm here at Villa now. I'll probably be here for the next 3 or 4 seasons. I obviously just wanted to try and keep in the team and keep on the right side of Ron, more than anything.
What happened then? Because obviously you said you saw some of the Andy Gray one, and Andy Gray was saying that there's a few little moments that kind of when the cracks started to appear. Was it the same with you, John? Well, how did your exit come about?
Listen, everything was great. At the end of every season, we didn't have freedom of contract, as you know. If your contract had expired, you still belonged to the club, and you couldn't leave without their permission. So the season finished, and at the end of every season, we used to sit at Bodymore in the canteen, and there'd be a queue you had to go and see the gaffer. The gaffer had organised all the players that were going to be negotiating and talking about a new contract, and you had to go and see Ron, the gaffer. You went in. You didn't have an agent. We didn't have agents in those days. It was just you, and you'd go in, and Ron would say to you, "You've either got, a £20 rise, a £50 rise, £100 rise. Going to give you a new contract, extend your contract," and whatever Ron said, basically, you just nodded your head and agreed to it. So I can remember us all sitting outside at the table and all saying, "Well, how much are you going to ask for?" And you'd say, "Oh, I'm going to tell him it's got to double my wages," and all that. And of course, as soon as you went in there, you didn't say a word. Ron just told you what you were getting, if anything, and you just nodded your head, accepted it, and went out. So I was now on £150 a week. He'd given me a 50% increase from the previous season, and I knew that the top salary was £250 a week. And I'd played more than 40 games that season for him. I'd been captain of his team twice, and I wanted 250 quid. Simple as that. I wanted the same money as Brian, Andy, Tommy Craig, and Johnny Gibman. We're all on 250 a week, and I wanted 250 a week, and he offered me 225, and I said no. I said I want 250, and he said, "Well, you're not having 250. You have 225, and that's it." Again, it'd given me another 50% increase from the previous season. He said, "You've had 50% increase first year, 50% increase the second year. Now I'm giving you 50% increase." I said, "No, I want 250. So I argued over 25 quid. And the players were going to go to Mallorca on the Saturday as an end of season, little jolly up, for a few days sunshine, a few beers, which of course they did almost every year. And I said, "Well, I ain't coming Saturday. If you're not going to give me this deal, I'm not coming Saturday." He said, "Well, you've got to, because it's all been booked." And I said, "Well, I ain't coming, not unless you give me my 25 quid. And I want £250 a week." And he said, "Well, you're not getting it." And I said, well, I ain't coming then. Cut a long story short, I didn't go on the Saturday. And about, I would say probably 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a phone call at home from the gaffer telling me that he'd agreed a deal with me to go to Brighton. and he said, "Do you want to talk to them?" And I said, "Yeah, all right, I'll go and talk to them." So I went and talked to them, and they actually offered me £275 a week, which was quite a big increase for myself. And they offered me various other signing on fees and loyalty payments, and it was purely a financial deal for me. They just got promoted into the Premier League for the very first time in their history. Everything just sort of fell into place, and but I was obviously very influenced, Matt, by the finance. It was something that I look back on a few years later, and I rushed into it. Really, I hurried into it because on reflection, had I stayed, I'm sure I'd have forced my way into the team and stayed in the team and done okay for him. But I mean, as it turned out, a couple of years later, they won the championship. They finished top of the league and qualified for the European Cup, which of course they won in '82. So I missed out on all that, and not to say that I would have been in the team during that period, but nevertheless, I gave up the chance of being part of that very successful team, the most successful team in Villa's history. And that was my own fault, really, for jumping at the money. And I think in years gone by, Matt, whenever I've either moved as a player or as a coach or whatever, I've always tended to go away and sleep on it for 24 hours, and I always remember rushing away from Villa far too quickly. And, history is what it is, and I have to live with it. But there were times when I looked at and saw how well they were doing, and without any doubt, there were some envious eyes from the South Coast looking how well the Villa were doing.
So just for context, John, 25 quid a week back then, what would it have got you? Would it have been the equivalent of 200 quid now or 100 quid now? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of money. I mean, 25 quid was serious money. I was probably on £25 appearance money at the Villa in those days. Probably £25 a week, £25 appearance money, or maybe £50 appearance money. But it was a lot of money to me. That 25 quid was a lot of money to all of us, without any question. But it was more the principle. I know that in my second season, 78-79 season, Tommy Craig played about 20 matches, if I remember rightly. Andy didn't play that many matches because he often was injured. I think Brian had missed a few games through injury. And I used to think, well, I played a lot of games. I was always playing, and I playing all different positions for Ron. Right back, left back, centre. I'll do whatever he wanted. I was quite happy to do that because I always made sure I got a game. If I wasn't so versatile, I probably wouldn't have played so many matches. And it was more a case of principle more than anything. I felt that I really deserved to be earning the top salary when I played 40 odd games, and there was other players that were playing 20 odd games, getting more money than me. And I think it was more out of principle that I jumped up and down over 25 quid. And but of course you didn't used to cross Ron. He took it fairly personal, and he just wanted me out the door basically as quickly as I could. So that was it.
I always feel the need to apologise, John, when we kind of almost airbrush out the rest of other people's careers when they're not out of Villa, because we've got so much to ask about Villa. So I hope you don't mind if now skip back to when you come back to Villa with Brian as Brian's first team coach, was it? In 1994, I believe, correct. November time, 1994. So just
Brian's birthday, actually.
That's right, Brian's 40th, I think, wasn't it, if I remember rightly?
60th, surely.
there speaks somebody who's got a full head of black hair compared to
not exactly black, but
Just before we get you back at Villa as a coach, was coaching always the natural progression once you'd stopped playing?
No, it was. I was 27 and I signed for QPR as a player. Terry Venable signed me at QPR as a player, and this guy I looked at this guy working every day with him, And I suddenly realised that I'd never been coached in my life. And I was 27, and I've been a pro footballer for 11, 12 years. And this guy was such an amazing coach. He taught me so much about my own personal game. Within 2 years of signing for him, I played for England. I was 29 years old. I was a granddad. In football terms, I was a granddad. And I got in the England side. And I remember saying to him one day, I wish I'd have known you, Gaffer. This is Terry. I wish I'd have known you, Terry, when I was 16 years old. I think, I would have been a much better player had I worked for you during that time. And but he taught me so much about coaching and all that. And I suddenly, he suddenly said to me one day, "What are you going to do when you finish?" And I said, "Oh, hang on, I'm only 27. What are you talking about that for?" And he said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm not really." He said, "Well, what would you want to go into coaching?" And I went, "Yeah, I probably do, But I hadn't really given it a moment's thought, Matt, what I was going to do. I was 27, and like all, uneducated footballers, you only think about tomorrow. You never think about years down the line at that particular time. He said, "Do you want fancy coaching?" And I said, "Well, yeah, maybe." And he said, "Well, why don't you do something about it now?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, why don't you go on coaching courses? Why don't you take more on the teaching side? Take some coaching sessions, go and teach at local school, go and put yourself up in front of people, taking a group of kids, even if they're 10 years old, He said, "You can go and be a coach, and you can speak to people and stand up and talk in front of kids and try and teach them stuff." And I'd never really given it that much thought. And he said, "You should start writing things down." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, if you see things that you like, if you see coaching sessions that you like," he said, "if you see my coaching sessions," and he said, you want to write them down and remember them. And he said, "You might want to use them one day." And that sort of, the light bulb switched on in my brain, and I started going home and writing down exactly what we'd done that day with Terry. Write down all these sessions. I've still got the exercise books to this day. I've kept them all these years, and written down. And obviously, when I first went into coaching and that, I started looking at these books and used them almost as reference books. And I'd see a session, I think, "Oh yeah, I remember doing that with Terry. I'll put that on tomorrow." And obviously, always with that, you copy stuff from coaches, but you always then just maybe change one or two things. Instead of it being a 5v5, I used to make it a 6v6. Then, I wasn't exactly copying it verbatim as such. So I started making up my own little sessions. I'd sit there sometimes, just draw. I might be on the bus or something and just drawing sessions. And then I started seeing things on TV, and you see, free kicks and corners and things like that. So I just used to write them down and keep them in a book, and then just look back at them over the years. And some days I'd sit there looking at my diary for the week, the coaching diary for the week, and I'd just suddenly go back to these books where I'd written down 2 or 3 sessions, and I'd use them for training. And the thing about Terry's training sessions were they were different every day. There was something different. He'd come in and he'd set up all these cones and bollards and everything. And it was always something different, always something fresh, always something exciting. And he was the one that really turned me on with going into coaching. And obviously when I went to Leicester with Brian, who he wanted me on the training, and between us, me and Evo, we used to look after the training sessions as best we could. And slowly, as time evolved, I became a bit more of the first team coach, whereas Alan became more of an assistant manager. He was superb on the administration side, in the office and doing all the paperwork and the admin, that arranging booking hotels and all that kind of stuff. So between the three of us, we seem to have got it sussed, and that really was a lot of ownership that Brian gave me to be his first team coach. He still had the final say on everything, of course. And obviously then we did fairly well there. We were quite successful at Leicester, and consequently Villa came calling and for the gaffer. And he sat down with me one day and told me that Villa had been on the phone and we got a chance to go there. And I said, come on and get your keys, let's go. I'm ready.
Did you remain good mates with them in the intervening years?
No, listen, this is 1991, and you didn't have mobile phones. I just had a house phone, and we bumped into each other. I continued to go to games still, which in those days was a way of kind of keeping in touch with everyone. You know, you might bump into somebody at a game, and you obviously talk about football. They'll ask you what you're doing, and the word got round obviously that I wasn't working, and Brian wanted to take me. And he called me at home one day. It was a shock, and he just got the Leicester job. He'd been at Darlington and done a really good job at Darlington, and he called me, and he actually said he was going to take Tony McAndrew and Evo to Leicester, and Tony turned it down, actually. So he's obviously a coach short. So he just called me one day out of the blue, and he said, what you up to? And I said, nothing. And he said, well, jump in the car. And he said, I've just took over at Leicester. I said, yeah, I've just seen it. It's brilliant. And he said, well, come up and see me. He said, I might have a job for you. So I went up to see him, and I thought it'd be like, in charge of the academy or doing schoolboy training on a Tuesday or Thursday night or something, But it was actually with the first team, and which was brilliant. So there was the three of us there, all ex-Villa players. Evo, of course, had finished playing at Leicester, so he still actually lived in Leicester. And between the three of us, we went to 3 playoff finals in 3 successive seasons, and managed to get back into the Premier League on the third attempt. So that in itself was pretty amazing, and we had a great time. Leicester's a good football club, got great facilities, great training ground. Used to be the old Filbert Street, of course, which was always a very good atmosphere there, and we had a really good time then, Matt. But then obviously when the Villa come calling, you don't say no to them.
You told me last week when we were setting up this chat, and I hope I'm not betraying confidence, but I think you described it as the best gig you'd ever had, being kind of one of Brian's assistants at Villa. Talk us through why that was the case. There
was a part of me that would still think, I want to go out and do it myself one day, but I'm Brian's assistant. I couldn't, I couldn't have a better job, and we came to Villa, and Leicester is a great club. It's a big club, but it's not as big as Villa. And Villa was a big club to me. The history that they had, obviously, just over 10 years before, they were champions of Europe. You got the huge stadium, you got Bodymore Heath, you got the following that they got, 45,000, whatever. I think in those days it was 37,000 was the capacity at Villa Park. For me, everything about the club, I remember coming, we were sponsored by Asics in those days. And they were the kit. That was the kit. And Muller yoghurts were the sponsors. And mate, first day I went to the training ground, Jim Paul, who was kit man, bless his heart, God bless him. I loved Jim to bits, mate. I loved him to bits. He come up to me. He said, "Oh, come down." He said, "I've got all your gear." So I went down his office, and he gave me like 3 black bin liners full of kit. Just absolutely rammed full of shirts and sweaters and training shoes and boots and God knows what else. And then he said, "Do you want a yogurt?" And he pointed across to me. There was like about 30 trays of these Muller yogurts. He said, "Do you want any of these?" He said, "Take a few home." So within a couple of weeks, I actually bought another fridge for my garage because I was just taking home. And we had a queue at our front door, my son was coming over, my daughter was coming, and next door neighbours all coming to pick up. I was taking orders, they're saying, "Oh, we've had enough of that banana yogurt. Can't you bring us some of the chocolate ones?" So we had Muller yoghurts everywhere, like Del Boy's, like Del Boy's flat. You lift up a cushion on the sofa, there was like half a dozen Muller yoghurts. It was, but suddenly, we've got all, as I said, we've got all that. I'm the first team coach of Aston Villa, for God's sake, amazing job. And I didn't have any worries, I was really, really chilled. And every day I'd go in, I was, as a coach, you're kind of 50% with the players and 50%, you're with the manager. So I could go in the dressing room and players would carry on talking. Brian would walk in the dressing room and everyone shuts up because it's the gaffer. But I'd walk in and I'd get all the banter. I'd get Tommy Johnson, Mark Draper, Andy Townsend, of course, one of the biggest jokers of all. Ian Taylor signed a couple of months after we joined, and there was a lot of banter in the dressing room, a lot of fun, very enjoyable, and obviously Brian we'd picked up a team that was heading towards relegation in 94-95 season, and we obviously had to try and keep them up, which was a big ask at the time. And it wasn't all straightforward, but nevertheless, I was in a great job. Brian had all the problems, and he's the gaffer. And as I obviously later found out, there'd be a queue outside his office on a Monday morning. All just want to go in and have a moan or discuss why they're not in the team, why they got substituted on Saturday, why they haven't got their new contract, and all that kind of stuff. And that was all Brian's problems. And I just used to walk past them all and go and have my dinner. And then see the gaffer, see if everything was all right, not doing anything else. And then I'd disappear out the building. Didn't have a worry at all. Had nothing to worry about. So all the worries were Brian's, which, obviously comes with the job. As much as I would help him on wherever I could, I wouldn't sit in on his meetings with players. That was down to how he dealt with that kind of stuff. And I had the best job in the country. As I said, I'd leave there some Fridays. Obviously, we used to play most Saturdays in those days. I'd leave on a Friday, and I didn't even know what the team was the next day. It wasn't really my problem. As much as I was interested, I thought, well, if Brian wants to tell me, he'll tell me. But if he doesn't want to tell me, then I'll stay stum. I'll just keep things to myself, and I'd go out there Friday afternoon. I'd go out with my mates on a Friday night, have a few beers, have a bite to eat, and not really worrying about tomorrow I've got to announce the team, and he's not going to be happy, and he's not going to be happy, and he's going to come and see me on Monday morning and kicking up a stink. He's going to be bloody miserable, and all those things that a manager has to deal with. I didn't have that problem. I'd learn from him. I'd watch him always, Matt. I'd see how he dealt with things and see how he got on with it, and try and gain the experience of Brian, because he was very, very good at his job. And I wanted to learn from him in that respect. But no, being the coach, it was a great job. And as I said, I was still kind of a player in a way. I could go in the dressing room and have the banter with the lads, and they'd tell me what they've been up to the last couple of weeks, which wasn't for the manager's ears, but was for my ears, and they knew that whatever they told me, I'd keep it to myself anyway. So it was great, and I could join in a little five-a-side and all that. In fact, I used to join in the warm-up with them and on a match day on a Saturday, and it really was a great time for me at that particular moment. And I said to Brian, actually, though, Matt, which I didn't say to you earlier, was when he got the call when we were at Leicester, and he got the call from Villa, and he said, I want you to come with me, JG, me, you and Evo, we're going to go to Villa. And he said, are you up for it? And I said, to be honest, Gaff, I said that there might come a time when I want to go out and do it myself and be my own manager. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll come, and obviously for 2 years, we signed a 2-year contract. And I said, for 2 years, I'll come and I'll support you and be your assistant, be your coach and everything. And but there might come a time after the 2 years when I maybe want to go off and have a go myself. And he said, well, if somebody wants you, it would mean that you've done a good job for me. If somebody wants to come and take you away and make you the head coach or the manager of their team, that would suggest that you've done a good job for me. So, and he said, I shall promise you, he said, I'll make sure that Doug will not ask for compensation for you if in fact you do go. And I said, yeah. I said, come on, we'll go. And I'll be there for 2 years. And in fact, we signed in November of 94, and I was there until October 96, when I obviously got the chance to go off to Wickham and do my own thing. So, but those couple of years were brilliant. We had some great players. I mean, you look at the team we inherited: Ray Houghton, Andy Townsend, Dalian Atkinson, Earl Barrett, Mark Bosnich, Paul McGrath, Steve Staunton, Gary Parker, John Fashanu was there. I said Dalian, Dean Saunders, Kingy, left back. We had some brilliant players. I'm sorry if I've left anybody out, but we really had some amazing players. Ron left us some great players. Ray Houghton, what a footballer he was. Incredible footballer. And that little Irish quartet that we had, Townsend, Houghton, Staunton and McGrath, were just amazing. They were brilliant players to work with. And slowly, though, over a period of time, Brian, he built his own team there, as you know. A few of those guys, we gave them a little, I think when we joined, we gave them a little bit of a buzz. You know, we lifted the place a little while, but obviously a lot of them now were coming towards the end of their contracts, and Brian was quite keen to bring in his own men, which of course he did over the forthcoming years.
What would be the measure of success for a first? Obviously, you want the first team to win the matches on a weekend, but if that happens, the manager gets all the glory. If it doesn't, the manager gets all the stick. But for you, day to day, was it kind of making sure your training sessions were bright? Was it for seeing the improvements in individual players? How did you kind of gauge what had been a good week?
Winning, actually. I mean, listen, match day, if you win, it can, it can cover up a multitude of sins. It really can. It can cover up so much. Just winning on a weekend. No one's got any arguments with you whatsoever. People can say, "Oh, it was drab. It was awful. Boring. 1-0. Yeah, it was a penalty as well. You probably didn't deserve to win, but you won. And with winning, with gaining points, it's always it's the best support you can have for yourself as a coach or as the manager. You win games, you win games, you win games. You win a cup, you win a trophy. You don't care. Have a look in the record books. Have a look back. Have a look back at the history. Cup. Even during our time there, it was always about winning. But I always felt in my particular role that I have to put on the best training sessions each and every week, inspired by some of the stuff that I'd learned with Venables. I wanted to always try and make it interesting, always wanted to try and make it different. Every day was something different. Always willing to try stuff, different free kicks. You'll look back on, occasionally you'll see the odd free kick on Twitter, which is during the mid-90s, and they've come from our training ground. We spent time working on some of the free kicks and set pieces and that, which obviously when they come off on a Saturday, I used to enjoy because it was me that instigated them on the training field during the week. But no, we always had to win. And that first 6 months we were there, from the November around till May, we had to stay in the Premier League. Otherwise, we were under extreme pressure over retaining our jobs for the following season. So we had to stay up. And listen, I think it was the penultimate game. I think we drew at Norwich, if I remember rightly. In early May, we drew at Norwich 1 each, and I think everybody else either drew or whatever. But we managed to stay up. But it was really by the skin of our teeth. We hadn't been brilliant during those first 5 or 6 months with Brian as the gaffer, and we were papering over the cracks a lot of the times, But we managed to keep up, and that was the most important thing. And obviously we started from scratch the following season. But no, I mean, I took a lot of pleasure out of, honestly, working with those players was just amazing. Having the opportunity to work with Staunton and Houghton and Townsend and McGrath, and see obviously the likes of Hugo Egiog was just emerging at that particular time. Bozzy was in goal, was also like brilliant guy to have around the place as well. And we ourselves were very fortunate to inherit such a quality squad, and I just enjoyed working with them every day. And some days I had to pinch myself to think of the ability and the quality of the players that we were now working with. But as a coach, that inspired me as well. And it's amazing how, 1 minute they're working with Ron Atkinson, next minute they're working with us, and footballers are always adaptable, and they adapted to us, I think, very, very quickly. And I think that Brian had such a good CV when he joined Villa, being an ex-player there as well. I think was obviously a lot easier for him to settle. He settled in obviously with the fans and so on and so forth. But it was a great time, Matt. And the following season, obviously, we did a lot better.
25 years since Aston Villa won a trophy. It's funny you saying about the free kicks, because we were speaking to Ian Taylor last week. And I think it was the Mark Draper free kick that started the run that year.
Against Chester.
I think it was it Peterborough? Townsend's flicked the ball up and That's Draper's volleyed it in. Was that one of yours, John?
Yes, it was one of mine. It was one of mine. Yeah, we'd go on the. I mean, obviously, this is always sometimes difficult. You go on the training field and you work at free kicks, and you kind of have to use the guys that are likely to play in the next match. And as I said, I would never actually know what the team was, so it was. I'd involve them, and I'd say to somebody, "Oh no, you don't need to be in this free kick," and they'd say to me straight, "Oh, I'm not playing then. Next game." So I'd say, "No, I don't know what team." So anyway, I used to you obviously sort of use the people that you're expecting to start in the next game, and you need to remind, and you go through it 4, 5, 6, 10 times, whatever, and obviously it starts to work, and it's everything's great, and then suddenly we get a free kick in exactly the position for this free kick, and someone else takes it. And this is footballers, Suddenly Steve Staunton says, "Oh, I'm going to have this. I'm going to smash it in the top corner," And it's like, Stan, you're nothing to do with this free kick. Go away, But now I'm on the bench, so I can't actually talk to any of the players. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to be extremely disciplined as a player to remember exactly what you're supposed to be doing. But yeah, we had a few up our sleeve, and I do remember that free kick. It was actually shown on Twitter, I think, in the last 12 months, and I had a wry smile when I saw it. And I just thought, yeah, I remember it. Mark Draper, he had to flick it onto his knee, and he kneed it. He flicked it up with his knee into the air and then volleyed it into the corner of the net. So yeah, I do remember that free kick coming off well.
We know that it was a great season all round. Villa finished fourth. Semi-final of the FA Cup, but just focusing just briefly on the League Cup. Brian didn't remember much about the build-up to the final when we asked him. Can you remember? I presume it was part of your role to keep the guys relaxed, wasn't it, in the run-up? Can you remember much about it?
Yes, I remember a lot about it. We decided to go to the Selsdon Park Hotel in Croydon, which is a very nice hotel, got nice grounds on it, got a golf course on it, and they've got a lot of snooker tables. There's a snooker room there, and we found a training field relatively close, and I seem to remember we were playing quite a lot of matches because we were in the FA Cup semi-final as well. We'd had a very good FA Cup run, but had obviously a very good League Cup run, so we're playing lots of matches. As well as playing our league matches as well. Obviously got 38 league games to play. So we were involved in a lot of games going on. And to be honest, training was always just a question of just ticking over. We'd play on Saturday, we'd have a game Tuesday night or Wednesday night, and then we're playing again the following Saturday or Sunday, and games were coming thick and fast. And training became, as I said, very relaxed. We'd even just have a walk. Some days we'd just go out and we'd just walk the whole perimeter of Bodymore Heath, and we'd walk round 2 or 3 times. That was it. Go in and have a bit of lunch and give them a wash and have a massage or something, and then send them home. And we went to Selsdon Park, and we didn't really do anything. We let the boys play snooker. They obviously had a curfew in the evening to go back to their beds and so on and so forth. Come down for breakfast the next morning. Went to this local training ground, and I remember this one morning we went to the training ground. It was about a day or 2 days just before the final at Wembley against Leeds United. We had a sort of 8-9 aside on this pitch, and one of the goalkeepers had a bit of a knock. So Jim Paul went in goal. Big fat Jim, who was about 20 stone. He went in goal. Paul McGrath didn't want to train because Paul was God, as you know. And we used to say to Paul, do you want to train? And he'd say, are we playing 5-a-side? And we'd say, no. He said, well, I don't want to train. So he wouldn't train if there was any running involved. So he didn't train that morning. He didn't want to train that morning. Somebody else didn't want to train because he had a bit of a knock. And so we ended up, I think Jim Walker played, and we ended up having this game. And I said, Jim Paul was in one of the goals, and it was just a mess about. And we played for about 40 minutes. It was real good fun. Everyone had a good laugh, and we scored some goals. You got a bit of a sweat on, you know, and then we went back, had a wash, all had a shower and that, and then we had lunch and game of snooker. End of. That was it. That was training for the day. And as you know, we went on to win the game 3-0. But the story that comes with that is that we were being watched. You know how Bielsa this year went and spied on the opposition?
Yeah.
Well, unbeknown to us at that particular time, because we found out 6 months or so later, Howard had actually got somebody to come and watch us training. Okay, and he stayed at the Selsdon Park Hotel, and he had to report back to Howard who had lunch, what they had for lunch, who got up and had breakfast, what did they do, how many of them were playing snooker, who were the ones that were playing snooker. He had to follow us to the training ground, and he said, I had to go back and tell Howard Wilkinson that the kit man played in goal this morning. The physio played on the left wing. Paul McGrath just sat on the side doing nothing, eating an orange and an apple or something. He just sat on the side. He didn't train. This one didn't train. And honestly, he had to go back and report all these things to him. And we went and obviously played the game and won 3-0. And it could have been 6-0. We played exceptionally well that day, and the team were brilliant. But that was, I can remember that story of this guy who was he was no longer working for Howard, so he told us that he followed us for 3 days, and he was having to report back all these weird stories to Howard, and I think Howard thought he was taking the mickey, but it was the gospel on the street. We had a very relaxed atmosphere going to the final, but that season, as you know, as you just said, Matt, you know, we finished 4th in the Premier League, which was, when you look at it now, it was amazing. We got to the semi-final of the FA Cup, and we absolutely pulverised Liverpool. But they had 3 shots. Honestly, they had 3 shots in the game and scored from all 3. And then, of course, we won the League Cup with an incredible performance. That was really amazing. Coming so soon after sort of joining the club as well, and Brian had almost revamped the team by then. You know, it almost revamped it with his signings, and all of his signings had actually worked. Even Savo, you know, Savo scored that day as well, as you know. But we were beginning to see the real quality side of Milošević. He was a really talented player. He just had to get his head right, you know. But it all come, and of course it was Big Macca. McGrath was just, life was beginning to catch up with him a little bit, you know. and Brian obviously brought in Gareth Southgate to sort of be his long-term replacement, and he converted Gareth from a central midfield player, into a central defender, and he certainly did exceptionally well after that change. So they were happy days, really good times, very, very happy, and as I said, I was particularly happy during that spell, working at such an amazing club, and being surrounded by such good footballers.
We've got you up to the place where you with Brian and Alan Evans, you've kind of done your bit in rejuvenating Villa, albeit a very good Villa squad that you inherited from Ron. Stamped your mark with Brian on adapting that squad to kick on. So what was it that when you got to kind of October, November 96, what was the pull then? Was it just time for you to go out on your own then?
I can remember Brian mentioned to me one day, he said, you'll probably feel something, you'll probably get a feeling at some stage where, a job comes up and you might quite fancy it. He said, just come and see me, just come and tell me about it. He said, I'll help you get it, if you know what I mean. If it's something that you want, he said, I won't want to lose you, and this we played Newcastle United on Monday Night Football, and Yorke scored a hat-trick, and we lost 4-3. We went up to Newcastle and checked in I think it was that morning. We got up there early that morning, checked into the hotel in Newcastle, and checking in at the counter was Alan Parry, the commentator.
Yeah.
Who was the director of Wickham. I kind of knew Alan over a period of time, and I said, how you doing? Everything okay? He says, he said, we've just sacked the manager this morning, which was Alan Smith.
Yeah.
They'd sacked Alan Smith that morning, and he said, "You're not interested, are you, Grego?" So I said, Wickham. I said, and because my family home was Windsor. I still had a house in Windsor, and that was kind of my family home. And my daughter my little baby girl was about a year old. Just over a year old. When he said, "You're not interested, are you?" And I went, "Do you know what?" I said, "Give me your number anyway." So I took his number, and obviously we had a game that night, so I focused on the game that night. And then I rang Alan the day or so later, and sort of said, "Well, what's going on?" And I said, "Well, I might be quite interested, but I'm going to have a chat with Brian." So I went to see Brian and had a chat with him, and he said, "Well, do what you need to do, and if you get a chance to take it, then come and tell me, obviously. Just keep me in the picture, keep me in the loop, So I ended up having an interview and got the job. And then I went to see Brian and okayed it all with him. And he said, if it's what you want to do, I'll allow it to happen. And he went to see the chairman, and true to his word, he made sure that he didn't ask for any compensation. And then I had to go in the dressing room and say goodbye to everybody. And I can remember tales. I could actually remember walking in the dressing room in my suit, because I was leaving that morning. I got a suit on and I was leaving. And everybody else obviously was all dressed, ready to go training. And I've walked in my suit, and I can remember Ian Taylor looking at me, and he went, "Oh no," because he knew that I was going, because I was all dressed up to go. I almost sort of, I had a suitcase in my hand as well with my boots. So he kind of knew that I was leaving. I remember him looking at me saying, "Oh no." And I said, So I just said goodbye to everyone and thanked them all for how amazing they've been. And obviously with a heavy heart, I have to say, I was going off to try and prove whether or not I could actually be a manager, stand up on my own 2 feet instead of, traveling along on Brian's coattails and living in a sort of reflected glory from Brian of, if the team did well, Brian did well, but obviously I also did well because I was, a small part of his backup team. And I kind of wanted to go out there and see if I could do it on my own and be successful in my own right instead of relying on Brian to be successful, you know. So it was a big call, and it was a tough thing to go and do, what I was sort of walking away from, but I couldn't live with myself if I didn't actually try and do it, and it was what I wanted. So I took up the opportunity, and it was a little bit different going into Wycombe, and obviously, and that was one of the questions that they asked me at the interview was, but John, you're working with like world-class internationals at the moment. You're coming down to League One. They were League One at the time, and he said you're coming down to League One, and you know the players are nowhere near as good as the ones that you're working with. How are you going to be able to adapt to it? You know, and I said, well, you know, obviously that's down to me to have to understand and appreciate that some of these players can't quite do what the players at Aston Villa can do. So I took that on board, but you know, I went there and loved it. Honestly, I absolutely loved it. We had a good time there during the 16. I was there for 16 months, and I had a really good time there. So I didn't regret that, and it made me really stand up, Matt. You know, it really made me. You know, now I had people outside my door on a Monday morning asking me why they're not playing, asking me why you took me off after 60 minutes on Saturday. Why did you take him off? And someone coming in complaining that, you know, they wanted a new contract, and I suddenly got all the crap that Brian had been dealing with, you know, on a weekly basis. I now was getting all the questions. I was now looking at myself after we got beat and not wanting to talk to anybody, not wanting to discuss football whatsoever, going home totally miserable because we'd lost the match, not speaking to the family for 3 days, hating my goalkeeper because he'd let one in through his legs on the Saturday and we got beat 1-0 at home. You know, suddenly it honestly, mate, it takes over your whole life, every single thing. And your mood swings are incredible. They go from incredible highs to unbelievable lows in such a short space of time. And that side of it, the psychology side of it, is really, really difficult to deal with, Matt. I now was beginning to understand how sometimes I'd speak to Brian and he wouldn't even answer me because his head was elsewhere. Which happens to you. You sit watching the telly some nights. You know, I used to sit watching the telly at night, and I can't tell you even what I was watching because your mind is somewhere else. You're thinking about the game on Saturday, about whether or not to change the goalkeeper, whether or not to do this, whether or not to do that, and so many things suddenly take over your life. And this is what I wanted, you know. So I shouldn't really complain. I did have a choice. And I chose to take this path, and I had to make it work. I had to be successful. Otherwise, you know, I was going to be out of work.
So how did the stresses of strands of that and your name being above the door and it all being on you for the first time, how were you able to go from that and to arrive at Villa, such a kind of, I don't know, a big brash bundle of energy and self-confidence? Is that you? Did you have to kind of put on, I think Brian described it as kind of putting on a suit or putting on a kind of costume when he turned up as a manager? Did you have to do that, or did it come naturally being a manager?
You mean when I came back to Villa?
When you came back to Villa, yeah.
No. It was very natural. I mean, listen, I'm usually very sort of happy-go-lucky, and whatever comes. Deal with it, get on with it, shut up, don't moan about it. I've been extremely lucky, even to have done the things that I'd done up until February 98, when I came back. You know, I was extremely lucky to have had the playing career that I'd had, and the places I'd been to, and my first flight, you know, to Bilbao in 1977, and all those things. You know, I totally respect the fortune that I'd been given, and I think that coming back to Villa, this was beyond my wildest dreams, mate. Honestly, I couldn't understand it all. It was hard for me sometimes to appreciate, well, not appreciate, to understand exactly what's happened to me. You know, I'm now the manager of Aston Villa, and it was quite incredible. No, it was just me. I'd come in with a smile on my face. And in fact, the first morning's training, I used to come in every morning, walk past the dressing room with the boys and always say to them, don't be late. Meaning, when we go out for training at 10:30, don't be late. And my first morning back with the team, I said, I just walked past the dressing room like I did as a coach 16 months before. And we had no team meeting. There was no team meeting. They all knew me. I knew everybody except Stanley Victor. Stanley was the only one that was new to me. I've been away 16 months. Everyone else was the same. It was the same squad that I'd left 16 months before. So they all knew me. I knew all them. And I just came back, said, don't be late. And we went out and we trained that morning, actually it was an afternoon. It was a Thursday afternoon. And we trained and we had a bit of finishing, had a bit of banter, had a bit of fun, had a laugh and a joke, smile on our faces. And we're playing Liverpool on Saturday. And about 2:30 on the Saturday, I did start to panic, I have to say.
Let's just rewind a couple of days then. And was it Steve Stride who first established contact with you to kind of talk about this crazy prospect of you being Aston Villa manager?
February 98, we just about had mobile phones, but we didn't have social media. So things, Brian had walked out that morning. And I was manager of Wycombe. We were in Bristol. We were playing Bristol Rovers that night at the Memorial Ground in Bristol. And we checked into a hotel in the afternoon to have a cup of tea, a bit of toast, beans on toast or something, and then have maybe a team meeting and then go off to the match. And the phone rang in the restaurant. We were we were in a private room, a side-off room, and the phone rang, the internal phone, house phone rang, and the lady come over. She said, there's a telephone call for you, Mr. Gregory. So I said, okay, who is it? And she said, I don't know. It's a lady. So I went, oh, okay. So I went across to the phone thinking it must be home. And this lady said at the other end, hello, Johnny. And when she said, hello, Johnny, there was only one person that ever called me Johnny, and that was Marion Stringer, which is Doug's personal secretary. And she said, hello, Johnny. And I, like a million things go through my mind. Why is she calling me? I had absolutely no idea. Why would she call me? It's 5:30 at night. And she said, hello, Johnny. I said, Marion? She said, yes. She said, Steve is looking for you. And she always called Steve Stride. She always called him Stevie. She said, Steve is looking for you. I said, why is he looking for me? She said, haven't you heard the news? And I said, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I said, what do you mean he's looking for me? She said, well, he's in Bristol. He's trying to find your hotel. So I said, okay. And I thought, well, maybe he wants tickets for the game. Maybe he's coming to our game tonight. That's what I thought, And then I called him on his mobile, and he's actually sat outside our. He said, I'm sat outside. He said, have you heard the news? And I said, no. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I'll come out and see you. So anyway, I've gone outside, seen his car, jumped in the front seat of his car, and he said, so I said, well, what are you doing here for? What are you here for? And he said, Brian's walked out today. He's left us right in the shit. So I said, what do you mean he's walked out? He said, he's resigned this morning. I said, you're joking. And this was now 5:30 at night, and I didn't know. He said, haven't you heard? I said, no, we don't hear nothing. We just went on the bus. And he said, so then I'm looking at him thinking, what are you doing here? And he said, we want you to come back. So I said, oh, yeah, but why? I said, well, what else? Thinking, he wants me to come back because somebody else is taking over as the manager. They maybe want you to come back as a coach. And I was so happy at Wycombe. Everything was great. It's a 20-minute drive from my house in Windsor to Wycombe, and everything was great. My life was rocking, And he said, no, we want you to come back as the manager. So I said, for how long? Thinking maybe he just wants me for a couple of weeks until they find somebody. I just couldn't believe or even begin to establish in my brain that they actually want me to come back as the full-time manager. It wasn't registering, Matt, at all. My brain was just on fire. It was fried. I had no conception of what he was actually saying to me. And I was trying to establish in my mind exactly what Steve was saying to me. And I said, when do you need to know? And he says, like, now would be good. And I said, but I've got a game on tonight and all that. And I said, but, and I was almost blubbering. I just couldn't get words out. Honestly, mate, I was just so overwhelmed with the conversation that I was having with Steve. And I kind of sort of said, does Doug know? Have you spoken to Doug about this? And he said, yeah, he's all for it. He's all for it. It's kind of my idea, but he sent me down here to get you. And I said, well, I can't go now. I've got a game, And he said, no, I know that. He said, what do you think? And I said, well, yeah, really? Do you really want me? Where's Jeremy Beadle? You might remember him. It was like that. Honestly, it's just this is a get up. Brian's going to be sat in the back of the car and he's going to pop his head around in a minute, something like that. But mate, honestly, it was just unbelievable. And we said our goodbyes and that we were going to talk later and all that. And I said to him, well, I'll need to ask my chairman. I'll need to get permission from my chairman, who was an amazing guy. Ivor Beeks, the chairman of Wycombe Wanderers, mate, he was the best chairman I ever worked for. Amazing guy. And I'm going to have to tell him that I'm leaving. Because make no mistake, I am leaving. This kind of thing doesn't happen to you in your lifetime, but it was happening to me. And I later, after the game that night, after the match, I went to see my chairman. I talked to him and he said, well, we want £250,000 for it if you're going to go. We want £250,000. And Doug and Steve and the board were going to meet me on the Wednesday morning to obviously finalise everything. But I had to get clearance from Wycombe first. But that, Matt, was the only night in my life, and I can say this without any fear of reprisals, I never slept for 1 second. Those nights when you go to bed and you say, oh, I can't sleep. I could not sleep for 1 second that night. I was laying there thinking the enormity of it. This is Aston Villa. They're probably going to triple my salary. I was earning £1,000 a week at Wycombe as a manager. And I was thinking, crikey, they're probably going to triple my salary. And oh my God, it's like, mate, and who they're playing Saturday. And I kind of quickly got in touch with somebody to find out who Villa were playing. And it's Liverpool. What, Liverpool at home? I think we were playing Wrexham at home or something, and Wycombe. And suddenly this whole thing, Matt, thrust upon me. And I never slept that night. And the following morning, I obviously got up and I had a meeting with my chairman in Wycombe. About 9 o'clock, I think I went over to his office and we had a chat. And he said, I want £250,000 for you, this, that, and the other. And I went off up to Birmingham to meet with the chairman and Steve. And we went to New Hall Hotel, and we sat. And anyway, we thrashed everything out. They produced a contract. I signed the contract, agreed the compensation with Wycombe, and I was now the manager of Villa. And we had a press conference at 5:15 at Villa Park that evening. And back in the day, I was kind of taken in as a surprise. Nobody knew who the manager was going to be, but there was a press conference at 5:15, and they literally hid me in one of the boxes in the north stand, and they brought me out, and I walked into the room, and I don't think many people in that room knew that I was going to be the next manager. And when I walked in, there was a few gasps from the journalists. John, JG, my God, we were expecting Ruud Gullit or some, superb foreign coach. Somebody actually, Matt, in the Mail that week, or that night, it might have been that night, Wednesday night, there was 10 pictures on the front page, I think, of the potential next manager of Aston Villa. There was 10 head and shoulders pictures, and I wasn't in any of them. I came from left field, completely left field. It was no one had even thought about me and considered me, and rightly so, rightly so. But obviously I walked in and there was a few gasps of surprise, and then it just took off from there, and we spent about 2 or 3 hours that evening just talking, interview. And I actually stayed at Doug's house that night. I had nowhere to stay. He said to me about 7 o'clock, "Where are you staying tonight?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "I'll stay at my house." So I stayed at Doug's that night. I always remember in his kitchen, he had the sandwiches from the press conference were in his kitchen. And I said to him, weren't they from the, they were in the press, them sandwiches, because I remember I could see the silver salver and the sandwiches. I recognised them from the. He said it was a bit of a waste to throw them away, so I thought I might as well bring them home. So I was learning stuff from him every day, and I didn't know Doug. Seriously, I didn't know Doug, even though I'd worked for him a couple of times. I only knew him as Mr. Ellis or chairman, and it was just, I'd see him in the corridor and I'd just say, "Hello, Mr. Chairman, how are you?" And that was it. So I didn't know him. I didn't know what he was like. He was called Deadly, as you know, and I just presumed he was an absolute monster to work for. I did. I really did, because of his nickname. And the persona that people gave him was that he was this real tough, high-flying. He was like an Alan Sugar type of guy, who didn't take any crap from anybody. And obviously, as I met him and I got to know him, I mean, he was obviously the opposite. He was a pussycat, really. But listen, mate, we had our fallouts from time to time, but he was still a really good guy to work for. But yeah, that was the start of it. So, and then on the Saturday we were playing Liverpool, and I remember standing in the tunnel at Villa Park, the old tunnel, when we had the old Trinity Road stand. And I remember standing in the tunnel and waiting to go out. And there was 37,372 there. It was full house, sold every ticket, Liverpool. I've got that long walk up the side, up the touchline to my seat. And I'm thinking, I wonder what the reaction's going to be from the punters, These are Villa fans who I've got to walk past, and I kind of was expecting a few jeers, a few whistles, maybe a few "what the bloody hell are you doing, Gregory?" When you walk along that side, you can pick up all the conversation. And to be honest, mate, I come out of there and I literally got applauded all the way to my seat. I was actually very overcome by it, and I think about it today. And it was, they were saying to me, "You're the manager of our club, Aston Villa. I'm a Villa fan. You've got my 100% support." And that's the feeling that I got when I walked those 40 or 50 yards up to my seat. It was an amazing reaction that I received from the fans. I wasn't expecting it, but it was very welcome at that particular time. And then, of course, we went 1-0 down after 5 minutes. I said, "Brian, where are you? Brian, you can have this job back. It's not that good, It's not as good as I thought it was." No, we went 1-0 down after 5 minutes, and I saw Michael Owen for the very first time. Because I hadn't seen him. I'd been away for 16 months, and in that time, he was now 18. He just got into the first team. My God, he was quick, unbelievably quick and talented, and he won the penalty for them after 5 minutes, and they scored, went 1-0 up, and I just thought, oh my God, this could be a long, long afternoon for me. But as you know, Stanley Victor come up with a couple of goals, and I got off to a good start.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the whole end that day, so I think if there was any cynicism, then it wasn't shown by any of that crowd. And by the time the 90 minutes was up, you've got us convinced anyway, to be honest.
Yeah, it was. Listen, it was sometimes things happen. You've seen it with so many clubs. The head coach leaves, the manager leaves, somebody else comes in, and they win the next game, and they win a couple of games, and suddenly things change, maybe, and he hasn't really changed anything. I went in and I just didn't really change anything. I just thought, well, I played an attacking team in that first game, and things just worked out for us, and each game we went into, we tried to win it because we had to win it because we were skirting a little bit with the relegation zone. And we were just sort of pretty positive in all of it in those first few games that we started. And as I said, there was nothing incredibly different that I did. I suppose I just brought back everybody with a smile on their face and tried to encourage a little bit of camaraderie amongst them. And that more than anything. And always picking the right team sometimes. And I always had the sort of an excuse of, well, it's not my team, it's not my players. These are Brian's players. So I've got to play whatever because I can't bring in my own team. It was coming up to transfer deadline day. I did have a chance to bring in a couple, but I didn't need to because everything was working very well for me. Savo was still Savo. He scored a few goals for me during that initial couple of months. Stan was Stan, and I still had a few problems dealing with those kind of things, but everybody else in the squad was working exceptionally well. And as I said, I inherited a very good squad from Brian, so it wasn't difficult to get them playing again.
So in terms of Stan, because you said he was the only new member of the squad, if you like. I know you've gone on the record about this previously, kind of saying you might have handled it a bit differently. In that moment, what was it like? Because clearly you got a reaction out of him from day one. Was he like no other character you dealt with before, or what was the dynamic like with you and him?
On the Thursday, my first training session was Thursday afternoon. I did the press conference on the Wednesday. I was appointed on the Wednesday tea time, and Thursday morning I had to go and say goodbye to the Wickham boys. So we put training back to the afternoon. I came in Thursday afternoon. As I said, I walked down the corridor, told everyone not to be late. We went out on the training ground, we did the warm-up and everything else. We're all organised. Everything was organised. Everything was sorted. And I wanted to do a little bit of finishing because footballers love finishing. They love shooting sessions. So I put on a shooting session at the end. And somebody crossed the ball into the box. And it was Stan and Yorke, I think, went into the box as a twosome to finish. And Stan headed this ball and scored with a header. And one of the coaches come up to me and whispered in my ear. He said, "You've cracked it with Stan." That's the first time he's headed the ball in over 3 months. And I looked at him, and he was serious. And I thought, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Really?" He said, "He hadn't had the ball for 3 months." He said, "You cracked it. He loves you." Anyway, he scored 2 on the Saturday, and he had a run in with a guy called Steve Harkness during the game, and I think Harkness had said some abusive things towards Stan, and I took Stan off with 10 minutes to go in that game, and he was in the bath after the game, and I went in to see him, and he was the most miserable man in the world. He just scored 2 goals against Liverpool, his old club. He was the absolute hero. He was my hero. If he wasn't Liverpool's hero, he was certainly my hero. And the fans had given him a standing ovation when he came off in the 80th minute. And he was still chomping. He was moaning about something to do with Harkness. Something had gone on there. And I'd said to him, "Look, you won. You scored both goals against your old club. You're the hero. Everyone loves you." And I couldn't seem to get through to him. He was still not very happy. I couldn't get a smile on his face, and I just thought, that's Stan, whatever. I'm sure he'd be okay in the morning or on Monday morning, whatever. And we played Tuesday night in Madrid in the UEFA Cup, and he started up front, and he didn't move an inch. And I took him off after 55 minutes, and I then started to see the other side of Stan and the other side of the problems that probably Brian had faced in the previous months before me going there, as a manager when Brian was the manager. So it wasn't all perfect. And then obviously things developed over the next few months with regards to Stan. But I mean, everyone else was fine. We were playing well. We were winning matches. We were scoring lots of goals, and everything in my house was pretty good. You know, I was honoured to be doing what I was doing. I was still pinching myself every now and again, but no. So everything else was good. The team was shaping up nice. We didn't add anything to the squad because I don't think we needed to. The transfer deadline went past, and it didn't affect us at all. Everyone was really playing well, and we finished the season off in style, as you know.
Atletico Madrid at Villa Park. Stan turned up for that one again, and I think Lee Hendry keeps going on about that chance that he missed. Yeah. I think Tal scored, didn't he? Stan scored, and I think Lee Hendry had a chance to kind of win the tie, and it didn't happen. Was that a night that fills you with pride because of how great a night, how great the atmosphere it was, or is it still one of those ones, missed opportunities, the one that got away?
It was a great night for football, great night for Aston Villa, but we didn't win, and we obviously didn't qualify, and so it's tinged with failure, really. I mean, that's what I was saying about earlier on about you can win things, you can win a cup, you can play rubbish, but you win a cup, your answer to anyone who wants to criticise you is, there's a trophy, there's a victory. Look at Wikipedia. It says next to my name, it says champion. We couldn't say that after that game. It was an amazing night. The stadium was unbelievable. Every single person inside that stadium was on their feet that night, literally for the whole game. It was end-to-end stuff. Stan scored an unbelievable goal, and as you say, Enders, Molina was the Madrid keeper, who went on to coach actually a bit later. But he was the Madrid keeper. He made a brilliant save from a fantastic little move. Henders just bent it into the bottom corner, and the keeper made this save. And so it finished 2-1. We lost on away goals, and so ultimately it's a failure. And this was Brian's team. This was Brian's trophy. Brian had got us all the way to the quarterfinals, and I messed it up for him. So, which it still sort of sits there and haunts me. What could have been? But listen, this is what football does to you, you know. But at least we performed. At least we performed well that night, and I think a lot of people that went away from that game will still remember it today as a nearly result. It was a great night, great atmosphere. Everything about it was great, except the outcome. And we're all in it to win games. That's what football's all about. Professional football is all about winning, and we didn't win.
You were a key member of Brian's backroom staff. How important were the people around you, John, when you were at Villa, in terms of your coaching staff?
They're incredibly important. You have to make the right ones. They have to be able to integrate with the players, and in the same way, me and Evo working for Brian, we're different people, and I'm always taking the mickey, having a bit of fun, serious. When I need to be serious, I can switch on the serious head, but I could always be light-hearted and fairly understandable of players' behaviour and how players are. Alan would be slightly different. Alan would obviously get more involved on the administration side of the job as well. And having those people around you all the time was important. And I immediately appointed Stevie Harrison as my first team coach. I knew all about Steve. And most importantly, I brought him there because he was a good coach, and I wanted somebody that I could rely on the training field, because there's days when you don't always get the chance or have the feeling to want to do the coaching that day. You delegate and allow other people to come on, and Steve, great personality. And he was similar to me in many ways, in as much as he could enjoy it, have a joke, have a laugh, have fun, be a player's confidant as well. He could always be the player's confidant. When players would go to him rather than me, because they'd kind of find out how I was thinking about them as players and so on and so forth. And they trust Steve, and Steve was just great with the players. So I retained the likes of people like Tony McAndrew and Kevin McDonald, who were working with the academy and the reserve sides. And these guys are always important. You know, your physio's important, your fitness coaches are important. I had Paul Barron with me as well, you know, as a goalkeeping coach. So, and I'm the sort of person that's more than willing to delegate the job to people. I don't tell the goalkeeping coach how to coach his goalkeepers, because I'm not a goalkeeping coach. He is. So I trust them. And you have to trust them. You have to trust them that they support you all the time. So, yeah, they're very important, Matt, those kind of people to have around. You have the right people with you.
One thing I've been meaning to ask you about for years is, because we speak about this a lot when the anniversary comes up, but what was that Arsenal game like for you at Villa Park? Obviously, we got the parachuting Santa who's kind of collapsed into the roof of the Trinity, and 2-0 down at half-time, an elongated half-time while that guy is getting seen to, and you come roaring back. Did you know what was going on in the dressing room on that day?
We knew that there'd been an accident of some denomination, but we weren't too sure what it was. And they said that the second half is being delayed. So we just sat in the dressing room, waiting to be told. It was the live game, of course, with Sky. It was live on TV. And we found out that there's been a parachute display of some sort, and this guy had either hit the roof or hit something on his descent, and he was injured. So we were having to wait. I'd actually taken off Julian Joachim. I'd actually substituted him, and he always used to take his boots off at the end of a match. He never used to undo the laces, and he just used to slip off his boots and put them on the floor in front of him, and he'd sit there for 5 minutes, probably have a cup of tea or something, because we used to drink tea in those days, and he would just sit there. And I took him off, and I replaced him with Stanley Victor. So Stan was coming on. We were 2-0 down. I thought, well, I'll just throw Stan. I'll try and get back in the game. Anyway, the half-time should have been 15 minutes. It ended up being about 25 minutes. And then we got the call. And something told me, I don't know what, I just said, no, I tell you what, Julian, put your boots back on. You're not coming off yet. Because obviously we hadn't seen the match officials because we were still in the dressing room. And I said, you stay on. You stay on. We need to keep you on the pitch. And I said to Stan, stay warmed up. You might be on in the next 10 or 15 minutes. So I left Julian on, and of course he scored our first goal that got us back into it about 10 minutes after the restart. But we knew nothing about it. We knew nothing about what actually happened. We just heard there'd been an accident. We obviously had no idea how serious it was or the extent of any injuries, but we'd find that out obviously later on. But no, so we just literally went back out, and suddenly Julian got us back in the game. It was in front of the whole end as well, and suddenly we had it off. And Dion scored 2 goals after that. He scored some goals for us, by the way. What I saw on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. I think it was his birthday or something, and they had 10 of his goals for Villa, and unbelievable finishes, incredible finishes. Balls dropping out of the sky and he's volleying them in the top corner, and man, he was brilliant. I got him, I think, just at his peak. And he scored some incredible goals for Aston Villa, I have to say. But obviously he scored the 2 in the second half that day and got us the winner. And suddenly, from being 2-0 down, we'd won the match 3-2, and we went back to the top of the league. And Arsenal were champions of England. And in the May of that year, I think it was maybe May the 2nd, in the previous season, we beat them 1-0 at home, 1998. We beat them 1-0 at home in the very last game of the 97-98 season. We beat them 1-0 at home. Yorke scored a penalty, and we had Hugo Ekiog sent off. and Arsenal were champions. They had been crowned champions the week before, and we beat them 1-0 in the final match of the season, which pushed us up into 7th position, which we ended up qualifying for UEFA Cup. And then they came in the December, still as champions, and we beat them again. So we beat them twice in the same year at Villa Park. So that's a little stat that I'm very proud of, Matt. So I wanted to let you know that.
That was Dwight's little kind of Panenka little dink penalty, wasn't it, over Seaman?
It was, yes. I'm not too sure if the ball even touched the net. He dinked it over Seaman, and I can remember Seaman laying down on the floor and sort of watching this ball go past him, and obviously not being able to do anything about it. But that was typical Yorkie, wasn't it? Typical Yorkie.
You must have, before you got me on the subject of York, you must have been kind of tearing your hair out, I suppose, when he's doing things like that in big matches. But I used to, from the whole end, it was, it's a bit of a cliche, worth the admission alone, but just watching him warm up and balance the ball on his head from the whole end all the way along the pitch back to the tunnel, just little moments like that just kind of made me kind of fall in love with Aston Villa, I think.
As first team coach with Brian, I'd always join in the warm-up anyway, because that was part of my job. But then when I came back as the manager, I went back into the warm-up like I did 16 months before when I left. I went back in the warm-up. So as the manager of the team, I still used to put my tracksuit on and go out and join in the warm-up. I always made a point of spending, a couple of minutes with Yorkie, just firing balls into him. I mean, his touch was brilliant. He was had a great first touch on the ball, and he just had great feet and an incredibly talented individual. And again, I think we got him, or we had him in certainly 96, 97, 98. We had him in a really good period. He was beginning to peak and really show that the full potential that he would later sort of show at Old Trafford when he obviously won the double there, the treble rather, in his first season. So again, outstanding player. And these were the people that obviously as a coach you want to work with these people, because they're like the best at what they do, and certainly Yorkie was one of those.
I don't know if it was you, but it was definitely Paul Barron and the goalkeepers used to have competitions, see if they could boot the ball into the top of the hole.
Oh, yes.
Did you ever get involved in that?
No, because I would have cleared the stand. I remember them doing that. Yeah, a bit of fun, mate. And then it becomes a superstition. With all footballers, it becomes suddenly you do that before the game, and obviously you win, so you have to do it the next game, and then you're obsessed with this thing, And we had a boy called, I think it was Chris Bowden. He was predominantly a reserve team player, but he used to, his kit. When he took his tracksuit off, the Villa for the reserves, he'd take off his tracksuit and he'd hang it up on the coat peg, and the trousers had to be perfect, tracksuit trousers, and then the jacket, and then his shoes and a sock in each shoe, and they had to be alongside each other. Everything was perfect, and it was just purely superstition. It was in his head. If he didn't put them like that, he was going to play terrible. So his superstition was his kit had to be, and of course everybody that walked past these clothes would kick his shoes. So suddenly, or just throw his underpants in the dustbin or something.
That's what probably cost him his Villa career.
He used to get angry. He used to get so angry about it because you were messing with his clothes, which in turn was messing with his superstition. And but yeah, I can remember Paul doing that with the goalkeepers, and then he started to warm up the goalkeepers in the tunnel. So Bozzy at half time would have a team talk, and then Bozzy would go out into the corridor and Paul would fire a few footballs at him in the corridor. But then he had to do that every week because suddenly it became a superstition. So footballers are terrible with that.
Just on Dwight, John, I think you spoke to my colleague Ash Priest a couple of weeks ago about how you look at Dwight's departure now through the prism of however many years on we are now, over 20 years on. None of us really wanted him to go at that time, but I suppose he could argue that he was vindicated in the first year by winning the treble at United. Was it the Everton performance when he didn't show up that kind of convinced you it was okay to move him on, or was it the money, or what was the thing that flicked the switch that said, okay, I'm not going to fight it anymore?
Well, I mean, obviously it's fairly well documented what actually flipped me in the end. But just to start with, I'd obviously come back to the club in February, and he was in my team. He was like first pick, and he'd been my first choice. And I had Savo, Julian Joachim, Yorke, and Stanley Victor. I had 4 strikers, and I occasionally played 3. I occasionally played 3 of them, but I had 4 to try and satisfy. And obviously Julian was the junior out of the 4 of them, but Yorke was by far my first choice. It was somebody with Yorke. Yorke would always play, and then I'll put somebody else with him. And Yorke was just such in such an amazing form in everything he did. He was brilliant in everything. Training, he was brilliant. I mean, he worked hard as well. Off the ball, he worked ever so hard, and he chased back people. And in my first game against Liverpool, he created the first equaliser, and he finished off the season. We played Everton away. We won 4-1 at Goodison Park. I think he scored 2 that day, and he was breathtaking. He was just brilliant, and literally I built my team around him, and which I later did with Paul Merson, But Yorke at that particular time, I built the team around him. He would play, and then 10 others would play with him. And he was such a vital cog in my team. And we finished the season, as you know, in 7th position. A huge part was down to him. And I was then getting pestered by Sir Alex about him. Mark Bosnich had signed for Manchester United, so him and Yorke were big mates. He was in Yorke's ear all the time, trying to get him to go to Old Trafford. And all that summer, I resisted calls from Sir Alex, and they started sending offers for him by fax machine. When we obviously used fax machines in those days, we started getting offers. We got an offer at 8 million, and I think Doug would have sold him there and then that day. £8 million, John. Quick, sell him quick. So I thought, no, you can't sell this is my best player, and my whole team is built around this guy. He's going to get us in the top 4 next season. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. We can't let him go. Anyway, as it went on, we came back pre-season. He was a bit moody, and I could tell that I was still getting the calls from Sir Alex and all that, and it just went on and on and on. And we played Everton away in our first game. Bozzy saved the penalty. We were fantastic. Walter Smith had just been appointed. It was his first match. They had the Scots Dragoon Guards were on the pitch doing a marching, with the orchestra and the bagpipes and everything. Man, the roof came off when the teams came out, and we did brilliant on the day. But Yorke, we played with 10 men because Yorke didn't try a leg, and he didn't chase back once. He failed to control the ball. He just kept saying to me, he sulked basically for 90 minutes. In the dressing room, he couldn't even be bothered to speak to anybody. He was just totally miserable the whole time. I can remember it so well. He basically saying, I don't want to play for you lot anymore. And in fact, that's what he told me on the Monday. He came into my office and he said that sentence, I don't want to play for Aston Villa anymore. And I was insulted. I took it really personally. I considered us to be a big club, one of the biggest clubs in the country, and he was saying that he didn't want to play for us. And I was incredibly hurt by it, and I was very angry about it. And we now got calls. They'd offered 10 million for Yorke, and then a few days later they offered us 12.6 million. And the story goes, I went to, and obviously all these conversations were beginning to appear in the local media, and the local media had seen how Yorke played on the Saturday, and all the fans that went to the game had seen Yorke not play his normal game for us on the Saturday at Everton. And obviously, word come back that Yorke was a disgrace and that he didn't try a leg and etc. And I went out with a friend of mine on the Monday, I think it was Monday evening. We went off to TGI Fridays in Sutton Coldfield, and I sat at the table, and a call come through from Sir Alex. Guy on the next table. There was two guys on the next table who heard the conversation I was having with Sir Alex. So I went outside, come back in, and one of the guys said to me, "It's not bad news, is it?" So I said, "What would be bad news?" He said, "If Yorke stayed," which I was a little bit shocked by. But then I thought, and he said, if Yorke stayed. And I said, "Is that how you feel?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Get rid of him, John." He said, he's not of it, and he was rubbish on Saturday and this, that and the other. It's time he went. And I kind of felt, if that's what the Villa fans think, then maybe this is the right time. And, within 24 hours, he'd gone. And we got 12.6 million. And I had a shareholders meeting in the whole suite on the night we sold him. And there should have been 800 people, I think, in there, were allowed in there. That was maximum, 800. I think we had about 1,400 in there. And they wanted to know about Yorke. And I remember standing up and saying, "Doug didn't sell him. I sold him. It's my fault. You can blame me," because he didn't want to play for Aston Villa anymore. And he told me to my face that he didn't want to play for our club anymore. And that's the reason we sold him. And we got the 12.6 million, which I think was a very good price for him. And so we had to find life without him, which I knew was going to be incredibly difficult, Matt. And all the way through, I didn't want him gone because he was our best player by a long way. And he was the one that could get us, into Europe. He's the one that could get us into cup finals because of his ability. And I didn't want him to go. I didn't want him to leave us. And unfortunately, in the end, he went, and we missed him, and we did miss him until we managed to get Merson in the building, which helped us to overcome the loss of Yorke.
Away from the kind of the upset of Dwight going, then you've mentioned Merson, you've mentioned Dublin. I could probably go through a list. Well, I've probably got a list of players here who you bought in: Delaney, Juan Pablo, Melberg, Carboni, so on. There's some players, and maybe I'm biased because it was my, I was back in your era, John. I was kind of, 19, 20 years old. So I'm automatically going to have an affinity with those days. But of all those, what do you think was your best kind of pound for pound signing? Whether it's somebody who was a bargain or somebody who had the right mentality. Melberg.
Melberg. He was. You're saying like pound for pound, and if we talk, he cost us £5 million. I chased him all over Europe. I followed him to quite a few different countries, and he was playing for Racing Santander in La Liga in Spain, and I went to, which I often used to do. I'd fly out. The good thing about teams that countries where they play football on a Sunday was. The fact that you could go to Madrid to see La Liga games on a Sunday. So we'd play Saturday. Saturday night, I'd get a flight to Madrid, and Sunday I'd go and see a game. And it was great scouting for me. And I went to see Madrid playing Santander with nobody in mind, really. And I suddenly saw this guy. He played right back that night for Santander, and he was quick as quick. And I looked at him, and I did a bit of research on him. I found out that he normally plays as a central defender. And I thought, well, if he's a central defender and he's quick, it would be, I sort of think of Des Walker, what a career Des Walker had. And Des wasn't the greatest footballer in the world, but he was unbelievably quick, which got him out of trouble so many times. And I just thought of Melberg, stick him in the centre of our defence. And he then played for the national team, and I went to watch him play. And I started going to finding out which hotel he was staying at, and I'd go in the hotel and walk, sort of hang around the reception, wait for him to sort of walk through, then grab him, and put him up against the wall and tell him that he's going to sign for Villa next week. But I did. I got a relationship with him, and I started following him, and I went back to Spain, saw him play again in Santander, and I just thought this guy is going to be fantastic for us. Very Swedish, and I remember him coming to sign the contract, and we agreed the fee, obviously $5 million. He sat in Doug's office, and I sat there he was with his agent, and he told Doug what he wanted, and Doug went, no, and he tried to offer him something else, and after about an hour, I went out the room. You ain't going to change this guy. And I said to Doug, just pay him what he wants. You ain't going to. And he wouldn't be the biggest earner in the club. Just pay him what he wants. And Doug wouldn't give in. Anyway, about 4 hours later, Doug agreed to everything that Melberg had asked for 4 hours ago. And he signed. And his first morning's training was a game of cricket on the plastic pitch at Bodymore. And he'd never seen the game of cricket ever in his life. And we used to occasionally have a game of cricket instead of training. And I can remember that very clearly. But yeah, I mean, listen, the players that you mentioned there, Carboni was amazing. Merson was incredible. He was an incredible player for us. And he often got us out of trouble with his brilliance. You know, he never used his left foot, as you know, but his right foot was just a wand. He was amazing. More often than not, he would be our best player each and every week. And yeah, he was in and out my office, which is quite well documented. But he was always a good trainer. And as I said, on match days, he was just brilliant. There was something inside of him. At 2:45, he just used to be able to switch on a switch somewhere inside him, and he'd go out, and he would just be incredible. I always remember the Coventry goal, of course, in the last minute when we were 2-0 down, and we come back 1-3-2, and he scored an unbelievable goal. But only Merson can do that. You remember his goal at Everton when he lobbed the goalkeeper from 40 yards? I actually laughed. I was in the stand at the time, and I literally laughed because I'd see that kind of thing off him every day. That was the kind of thing that Paul would do every day. He was just such a talent. But yeah, you named a lot of players there. Juan Pablo was an amazing player, an amazing person. And we had lots of good players: Stevie Watson, Stevie Stone. Dion was brilliant. Georgie Boateng came in, and I didn't spend that long with him, I have to say. But yeah, I wanted us to be the best club in the country. I wanted us to be when people talked about winning the championship, I wanted them to mention our name, and they'd say, you know, match of the day. Well, you know, it's out of Liverpool, Man United, Chelsea, or Arsenal, and we were sat top of the league. And they wouldn't even mention us, and that used to gall me. You know, I used to get really peed off with that they're not even mentioned us. And I kind of thought, you know, 2 or 3 years down the line, I wanted us to be mentioned in the same breath as the big four, as they were at the time. I wanted us to get Champions League places had just opened up in the Premier League. They were now going to allow 4 teams from the Premier League to go into the Champions League, and I wanted us to be in that 4. I just wanted us to be the big club that I knew that we could be, that we were in 81 and 82, and I wanted us to be the same again. And I was very passionate about that, I have to say. And it used to gall me when we didn't get mentioned, you know, about being potential cup winners or cup favourites. We never got a mention. It was always, as I said, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, and Man United. And I wanted us to be mentioned in the same breath as those people.
Why do you think, without wishing to open old wounds, John, why do you think it did kind of tail away then? Because obviously it was the 98, was it? Villa were top at Christmas, then it just
Yes, we went top in 2001. We started off very well in 2001, 2002 season. We started off very well indeed. And we beat Bolton Wanderers at home and went top of the league at the end of October. And that was when the famous story of me trying to sign Muzzy, is it? I wanted us to sign Muzzy. And Doug said no to me, and it was the first time he'd ever sort of said no, blatantly said no to me improving the squad. He actually said, "Why do we need him, John? We're top of the league." that was his financial logic, and obviously, and I lost a bit of my desire. I say my desire. I lost a little bit of my desire, in as much as it always seemed about money. It always everything that we tried to do was about money. Now, I'm not saying it was the wrong way to be. Doug didn't ever want us to become a Leeds United, who, of course, at that particular time in 2001 were really struggling financially. They had huge loans that they'd borrowed to buy players with, and the players weren't playing particularly well. They borrowed huge amounts of money at big interest rates, and they were heading towards bankruptcy. And Doug didn't want us to become another Leeds United. He would often say that to me, and I understood that and appreciated that. And sometimes I'd get in my car, Matt, and I'd drive up and down the country, scouting, looking for players, looking how we could, maybe nick somebody from somewhere, for, as I did with Delaney. Delaney cost us 250 grand. And I started looking at bargains like that, and I was becoming a little bit more fed up with a kind of a lack of support, I think, from the boardroom with regard to improving the squad. And I got a little bit delusioned with Doug. I kind of felt Doug was quite happy to finish 15th in the league, but make £5 million profit that season. I wanted us to finish in the top four, even if it meant losing a few quid. And that wasn't the way that the chairman wanted to run the football club. And I think that, more than anything, started to get to me, and it started to eat away at me. That the club didn't really want to throw any more money at trying to win something or trying to qualify for Champions League. And I lost a couple of players through injury, and I lost a few games at home. And I slowly started. We slipped down the table, having been top in October. I think by January we'd started to slip out of the top six, even, which hadn't really happened since I'd been there. And things just, I kept looking back to the Muzzy incident and thinking, well, we should have bought him at the time to improve the squad, to have made the competition better for everybody. It would have given us a great boost at that particular time. And I think in the end, I slowly was drifting further and further from the chairman, and it was starting to affect me on a daily basis of not being involved with the top four, of playing second fiddle, to the top four. And I blamed the chairman at that particular time. I felt that he wasn't giving me the support that probably I deserved. But as you know, we'd had a few run-ins over the years, and I think he always gets his own back, as you know. With Ron Atkinson, he used to have a few run-ins with Big Ron, and in the end, he fired Ron. That day would come. One season, Ron finishes second in a Premiership, and then a little while later, they were languishing near the bottom of the Premier League, and Doug got his own back, really, for some of the things that maybe Ron had called him over the years, and I think that was very much happening to me as well. Me and him started to drift further and further apart. And we were both to blame, possibly. So I got up and went.
So I was chatting to Brian recently, and he was saying it's almost as if managers of that time, really successful managers, had got a shelf life. You get to 3 or 4 years with Doug, and if he hasn't sacked you, you're worn down by him anyway.
There was local journalists from the Mail, from the Express and Star, from some of the dailies, who at the end of every season, I used to take in 3 or 4 bottles of champagne into the press room, some sandwiches, before they used to do food and that in those sort of places. And I would take in 3 or 4 bottles of champagne after the last home game, thank everybody for supporting us that season, thanking them all in my own little way of having a drink with them. Many of those journalists were working in their newspapers when I was a player back in the late 70s. I'd known them for more than 20 years, and they were now starting to write bad things about me in the local media, which I found unbelievably insulting, to question me, to question how long Doug was going to put up with me. And these were guys that had sat on our team bus back in the day in the 70s. We used to give the local journalist a lift back to Birmingham on the team bus. He used to sit on the team bus with all the players. And when we got back to Birmingham, we'd go to the elbow room, and we used to take the journo with us. He'd come with us and have a few pints in the pub on a Saturday night once we got back. These same people now were not really supporting me very well with the local media, and started to write bad things about me, and basically waiting for Doug to possibly sack me when we went through a bad patch of December. And these same journalists were starting to write these bad things about me, which I found unbelievable. And one of the journalists actually rang me. I won't tell you who he was. He actually rang me one night and he said, JG, I need you quick. He said, my gaffer, the editor, I put in an expense form the other day. Listen, I put in an expense form the other day, and I went to San Carlos restaurant in Birmingham with you last Thursday night, and we did a story about Stanley Victor Collymore. And if you get asked, you were with me last Thursday night. And obviously he'd put in a fake expense bill. And these were the guys that then on the Saturday, if we lost at home, they were slagging me off, you know. And so things had started to go a little bit sour, Matt. And I was a little bit like, and honestly, mate, I thought I was going to be the manager of Aston Villa for 20 years. I did. After the first couple of seasons, you know, things were going very well. I just thought I want to be the manager for the next 20 years. And I looked at myself as possibly trying to do an Alex or an Arsene Wenger. And I really thought I could be here forever, because I was the happiest man in the world, you know, doing what I was doing. And I never thought it was ever going to end. I really didn't. But, yeah, so things went a little bit sour and a little bit difficult for me. And, you know, it was, I went down to Charlton. We played Charlton away on Monday night football, live on Sky. And I just wanted to win that night. I just wanted to win. I wanted to finish with a win. And that was going to be my last game. And Juan Pablo scored. We won 1-0 at Charlton. And we were 7th in the Premier League. And I went to see the chairman and Stevie. And I left a couple of days later. And that was it. The love affair was over, mate. And it was all downhill after that, mate.
I can't be holier than thou about the conduct of my fellow journalists, because I've chased a few managers out of Villa Park myself, albeit lesser ones than you. I will let you go eventually, John, but I wanted to touch on, he must have been a journalist's dream, to be honest, back then, because you know, sometimes as a reporter you have to prod a manager to try and get him to say something interesting, whereas you were kind of sound bites left, right and centre. Do you have a favourite one, or do you remember them as well as we do?
Yeah, I think when I used to sit and watch Match of the Day and Match of the Day, really, there wasn't much else on football-wise. I think Sky Sports News had started. And you'd see in the Premier League, somebody had just let a goal in the goalkeeper had dropped it or something, or given it to the striker. Striker scores, and they get beat 1-0. And then the manager came on, and they'd say, "Well, what do you think then about that mistake by your goalkeeper?" And they say, "Well, these kind of things happen, and I'm sure he'll be disappointed." And I think, disappointed? I'd want to punch whatever. I want to knock him out, if he was my goalkeeper. And I just used to see them coming on, and I just think, why don't you just be a little bit more honest, be a little bit more open? And I think that once I kind of promised myself that if ever I was put in that situation, I'd try and be a little bit more open and a little bit more upfront about, how I'm actually feeling. I've just lost 3 on the trot. Oh, how are you feeling? And so I just wanted to be a little bit more forthright, a little bit more open, a little bit more honest, to be fair. And once or twice I probably did overstep the mark with some of the comments that I did make at the time. But I wanted to try and put it in perspective that, yes, I am bitterly upset and bitterly disappointed that we've just lost the game. And you don't need to constantly keep reminding me that we haven't won for 3 games. I know that kind of thing. So yeah, I did used to be a little bit outspoken, I suppose, at the time. And I felt with the journos, that's where I always felt I had a pretty good relationship, because people would ring me up on a late Thursday afternoon, be under pressure from their editor that they need to write a story on Aston Villa, and they've got nothing whatsoever to talk about. And so I would just tell them, "Oh, by the way, today we went canoeing." I'd tell them something that they obviously wouldn't know about, and I used to help the journalists as much as possible, because we're all in that vicious circle that we're all working hard, and we're all trying to do the job as best as we could, and sometimes you guys don't have anything to write about, so I'd give them a little story, but it tended to be true. But yeah, then sometimes there was a guy called Joe Lovejoy. You know him?
Yeah. Was he on the Times, I think?
Yes, he was at the Times when I was there, and he come to my office one day and chatted, and he wanted some Doug stories, and I told him a few Doug stories, and then I'd tell him a story that was off the record, and then the following Sunday he published the whole conversation in his column. He wrote the whole conversation that I'd had, where I'd criticised the chairman and basically made fun of the chairman. He'd recorded everything, and he printed it on the Sunday, to which I had to then report to the board and go and sit in front of the board and try and justify the article. And I did it in good taste with Joe. I thought it was going to all stay in the room as such. He would print some of it, but not the pieces that he put in there. And I got let down terribly with that particular incident, and so it made me a little bit more careful of how I spoke with people as time moved on. But yeah, it was hard sometimes, because people just wanted they wanted a little inside stories about the chairman, what it was like working for him, and that kind of stuff. And as I said, Joe really let me down at that particular time.
Here's some of my favourites, John.
Go on.
If I had a gun, I would have shot him. Yes, we know that's Dwight. The chairman of Brighton wouldn't recognise him if he was stood on Brighton Beach in a team strip with a seagull on his head and a ball in his hand.
And a ball under his arm, yeah. That was Gareth. I mean, it was 100% correct, because Gareth Barry came to us with Michael Standing, 2 boys from Brighton Youth Department, and Gareth Barry had been substitute once for their youth team. He hadn't played for their youth team. He was 16 years old, and he'd been subbed for their youth team. And after he came to us, and obviously on his 17th birthday, he signed a professional contract, and we still hadn't settled up with Brighton for his compensation. The compensation, we had to pay Brighton compensation, and I think we offered £50,000 for the 2 of them, which was a lot of money at the time, considering that Gareth hadn't even played. He hadn't even started a game for their youth team. And And within sort of 6 months, Gareth Barry come to us, played in my first team at Sheffield Wednesday, made his debut, started the new season in August 98 at Everton. He played up against Duncan Ferguson and was brilliant. And suddenly got recognised by Glenn Hoddle, who invited him to train with the England team. And suddenly my little Gareth Barry that had just played substitute once for Brighton, Brighton were now saying, oh, he's the best player we've ever had. Yes, we had him since he was 8 years old. In fact, we signed him when he was still in his mother's tummy, in 1997. And we won £2 million, and that's really because their chairman wouldn't know who Gareth Barry is. Trust me. I mean, Doug wouldn't really know anybody that played for our academy. Not have been sub once for the academy team, and it was just being totally honest. They'd never seen him play. I didn't think they'd ever seen him play, and that was that little outburst. But yes, there was a few of them. There was one once about the referee's genitals, I think.
I'll tell you one that you might not remember, John, that amuses me. And this was apparently you did an interview. Remember Loaded magazine back in the day?
Yes.
A bit of a lads mag. Apparently, this is what you said, apparently. What the is art? A picture of a bottle of sour milk lying next to a smelly jumper. What the is all that about? And look at opera. To me, it's a load of shit, but people love it. I'd say football is art. When I watched France versus Holland at Euro 2000, I was orgasmic.
Well, it's the sort of talk, Dan, that we would have down the pub, me and you. I mean, it is that, isn't it? It's the sort of thing that me and you would say down the pub. We'd sit down the pub and talk like that. So, I mean, Loaded come on and they just said, no holds barred. Let's just have an open chat. So we did. I can remember the actual article. I've actually seen the article since, but yeah, I mean, that's just how I felt. I mean, I couldn't understand. I don't understand. A pile of sweaty clothes sat on the floor, and people think it's wonderful. But anyway, yeah, there was a few of those.
To me, if you didn't have some of the kind of pantomime around the edges, I think it'd be a fairly boring existence. We all love what happens on the pitch on a Saturday or a Tuesday or a Sunday or whatever.
Yeah.
But I just love the kind of characters and the personalities around the edge of it. And it just, I don't know, and I'll probably sound like I'm blowing a bit too much smoke up your arse now, John, but it's kind of having that swagger that, yeah, we're Aston Villa and, we're going to entertain and we like it to be fun. And just that kind of wearing that belief. And that's why I'm on a bit of a kind of a crusade here, but that's where I've fallen out with managers in the past, where they've tried to downgrade what we're about. That's what you brought to Villa for me. That's the way that you kind of gave us that swagger back.
I wanted to be mentioned in the same breath as Man U. I wanted our club to be talked about in the same breath when they were suggesting, people what teams are going to be challenging for the title. We never got mentioned, and even in Brian's day, when Brian was finishing fourth in the Premiership, like consecutive years, and won the League Cup, Villa still were not recognised as being potential Championship winners, and I wanted us to be talked about in the same breath. I think that was what drove me on, and I kind of was on a kind of a crusade to make us be spoke about, where they can't ignore us. I think that was really me. You can't ignore what we're doing, what we're trying to say to people. This is us. This is Villa. When you come, we're not scared of anybody. When you come to Villa Park, mate, you're going to go on with your ass kicked. If not, we're going to do our best to strangle you. When you come to us, don't expect an easy game. And I wanted that to be transferred to my team, and I wanted that to be transferred to the public. And we were pretty formidable during those nearly 4 seasons. Whilst I was there, we had a pretty good home record. And I just wanted it every game to be like the Atletico Madrid match. I wanted that atmosphere. I wanted people out of their seats. I wanted people excited, and I wanted people to talk about our club in the manner in which I wanted us to be recognised. I wanted us to be recognised as one of the top 5 clubs in the country. And when you come to Villa Park, mate, don't expect anything, because we ain't going to give you anything either. I had 2 visits to Anfield while I was there. We won at Anfield twice in 2 visits I had. We won 3-1 one year, and the following year we went back and we won 1-0 at Anfield. And they were standout results. Liverpool were still challenging for the Premiership, and we went to Anfield twice and won. And that's what I wanted us to do. I wanted us to go to those places and not fear the opposition, and feel like we actually deserve to be mentioned alongside them. And I think that what drove me on particularly.
Just a couple of bits. This is a ridiculous thing that kind of brightened up my life on Twitter. Do you remember when I tweeted that picture of the towel as a backdrop to I think it was Alan Thompson's press conference unveiling?
Yes.
So just for context for people who don't know, I think a couple of years ago I found this picture of a press conference backdrop, and rather than having these printed kind of fancy backdrops that they've got now, you've got like a beach towel that was hanging up behind you. And I think you came back to me, and you've still got that towel, is that right?
Yep, still got it. The photograph that I was holding the towel was actually in Cannes, in the south of France. And the photograph is probably only about 4 years old. So about 4 years ago, I was in Cannes, and I took that photograph of me holding the Aston Villa towel. I was just about to put it on a sunbed in the hotel I was staying at. So yeah, I still got it. I've still got Stanley Victor's shirt from my debut as the manager against Liverpool. I've got his framed shirt still from that game, in a frame with his picture in the frame, and it's been autographed by Stan. So that's from my very first match as Villa manager. I've still got that. I've got Juan Pablo's shirt from his first goal against Coventry. He signed in January. He didn't score until April. But I've still got that shirt in a frame. Number 8, he was actually number 8 that day, and that was his first goal that he scored for Villa. I've still got David James' goalkeeper's shirt from saving 3 penalties in a penalty shootout in the semi-final against Bolton. I've got Peter Schmeichel's shirt from being the captain against Manchester United in an FA Cup match at Villa Park. I've still got his goalkeeper's sweater from that, and various other bits and pieces, mate, from my Villa days. I've still got all the programmes from me as a manager, all in binders and so on and so forth. So, mate, I've got a bit of memorabilia from some of the best days of my life.
You're sitting on a bit of a nest egg there, John. I don't think you don't need to flog yogurt to the neighbours anymore, do you? If you've got all that tucked away.
I can look at them and they just mean something to me, and they're nice little sort of mementos that I've kept over the years. And yeah, I remember that day. I mean, I'm talking to you, Matt, about it now, and I can remember everything. I can remember about Juan Pablo scoring, and it was like, the conversation after the game, everyone I saw, the first thing they said was, he scored at last. Oh my God, he scored at last, particularly the chairman. He was happy that finally, after paying £9.5 million for him, record signing, he ends up scoring a goal. So, lots of little stories with so much of that memorabilia, mate.
We'll end on a high in a minute, but I suppose I better ask you about the cup final, because I've neglected to ask about that, haven't I, in 2000? So is that one of those ones that haunts you because we didn't win it? Yeah,
I mean, in the same manner that we spoke about Madrid being an amazing night against Atletico Madrid at Villa Park, we actually lost the tie. We won the match that night, but I mean, we actually lost the tie. But it was such an amazing football match. The excitement, the going 2-1 up, and obviously Lee Hendry's effort that we nearly scored, and the whole night was amazing. We got a standing ovation as we come off, because the game itself had been brilliant. And I think, the game against Chelsea, the game was rubbish. It wasn't exciting. It was boring. It was dull. Both teams were as bad as each other, and we lost the game. And so you don't come out of the game with any glory whatsoever. In fact, we were awful, and I obviously always remember that the Villa fans were at the tunnel end, and I had to walk past the Villa fans to go down the tunnel, which I knew before kickoff that was what I was going to have to do. So make sure you've got the cup with you when you go down there, which of course I didn't have, and we performed badly as well. We didn't perform at all, and I don't know if you remember Benny Carboni had a pair of gold boots, and I took him off, I think, middle of the second half. Anyway, he got the gold boots, and at the end of the game, he ran over to the Villa fans and threw the boots in, and they threw them back at him.
Is that true? They didn't really, did they?
No, that's true. He had this gold boot, and I thought, when I first saw him, I thought, what are you doing with gold boots? Just wear your normal boots, like that got you here. But he got these gold boots. I think someone gave him a couple of grand to wear them in the final, and he threw them into the crowd, then threw them back. And you can laugh about it now, but mate, no, I've had sleepless nights. Honestly, I've had many sleepless nights about that. Just, God, why didn't I just throw, 4 up front and just try and get back in the game? And if ever there was a game in my life that I wished I could replay, it would be that one, because I felt that I'd let down so many people with a poor performance, and this is what I was saying to you earlier, Matt, about Brian. About how ultimately it comes back to the manager. It's his fault without any question. I can't avoid it. That result and that performance was my fault. I wish we'd have played it. We had a team meeting on the Wednesday, actually, and Gareth, I finished the team meeting, and Gareth Southgate was so motivated. He said, "Can we go and play it now?" Because we're so pumped up. I'd pumped them up to a crescendo, ready to play. And he said, "Can we go and play it now?" And I suppose, had we gone and played it then, we'd have won, if that's any excuse. But no, it's so flat, Matt. It was so flat. And we didn't come out of the game with any credit, which we did, of course, against Atletico Madrid, but we didn't this particular day. We didn't come out with any credit. And to be honest, the semi-final, we were poor in the semi-final that went to penalties, but we won, and winning sometimes covers up all the deficiencies, which it did that day. But no, that was what I was saying about how the manager feels. The manager, you take the responsibility for everything, and it's haunted me ever since. It's been with me, and as you are today, a little bit reluctant to talk about it, to bring it up, but it's something that will be forever there, and it's on the internet. Runners up. Alan Hansen's famous quote: "First is first, second is nowhere." And that's how it feels. Second is nowhere. People talk about FA Cup finalists, and basically they mean FA Cup losers. So no, it's stay with me, and it'll be there with me till my dying day, mate. I'm afraid.
Well, just to go out on a high, because you've spent 2.5 hours of your time with me, and then I've depressed you by reminding you of 2000. I remember back in the day, and Martin Swain was a big kind of mentor of mine in terms of getting into the industry. So tell me about kind of when you were at the Jam House as, tell us a little bit about your kind of love of Springsteen and your time as a performer. Because I think Dan's got a photo of you from our archives. There you go.
Yes, that was the Jam House. Stridey, Steve Stride was a guitarist, and I had back in the day. There's a guy called Gordon Smith who played for Brighton with me. And Smith Must Score. Have you ever seen that?
That's it, the cup final, yeah.
FA Cup final in 1983 against Man United. He should have scored the winner. And anyway, I played with him at Brighton in 1980. And when he joined us, he had a guitar and he could play the guitar. So I sat with him and he could play Beatles songs and all that. And I said, would you teach me if I buy a guitar? Anyway, I bought a guitar and I started to try to play it. And I couldn't play it. I was rubbish. And so I packed it in, but I still had the guitar. And I literally took it with me every house that I moved to. I took this guitar and stood it in the corner of the lounge, you know. And then after a while, it had no strings on it. And I looked at it one day and I said, I've got to learn how to play it. Anyway, I got it restrung, and I knew Stridey played the guitar. So I talked to Stridey about it. And when I went to the Villa, now I could play a few tunes on it. And I used to go around Steve's house and would play guitar. He'd teach me a few songs. And anyway, I got speaking to Swaney, who's obviously in a group. And I'm a massive Springsteen fan, and I started playing some of his songs and so on and so forth. Anyway, I got with Swaney, and he was in this band, and we got talking. And I wanted to play with the band, and so we ended up playing a couple of gigs, and then we got invited on the Ian Wright show. It'll Be All Right on the Night. He had a TV show, and I saw him in a hotel one day, and he asked me to go on it, and I said no, I'll be too embarrassed to go on it. And then I saw him a few months later, and he got on his knees in the reception of a hotel, and he come up to me, he prayed, and he said, JG, please come on my show, please. I said, well, can I bring a band with me? And he said, yeah, you can do anything you want, but please come. So I said, okay, I'll come, and I'll bring a band. So obviously I asked Swaney to come, and we went on the show, and we played the song, and we did okay. And then we started to play a few bits. We played at the NEC. There was about 7,500 there at the NEC one night. We played some awards. There was some awards night, BRMB award night, I think, or something like that, music awards. And we played there live. And so we just had a good time for a few years. And I continued to play it. And obviously I've seen Bruce Springsteen all over the world in many different countries, and I would always between me and you, Matt, I'd always go and see a player to coincide with Bruce Springsteen playing in the same city that weekend. You know what I mean? So just purely coincidence, you know, that Bruce Springsteen's playing in Milan this weekend. I'm going to watch AC Milan play on Sunday. So yeah, it always seemed to tie in nicely. And it's not true. What's not true is in 1999, we got offered the chance to go and play in New York in a pre-season friendly in the Gotham Cup with Fiorentina, Rapid Vienna, and Ajax, and ourselves in this pre-season tournament in New York at the Meadowlands, the Giants Stadium, basically, where the Giants play American football. And we got invited. So I said, yeah, it'd be a great trip. We'd go to New York for like 4 days. I swear to God, I didn't know. Stevie Stridey calls me a couple of days later and said, on the Saturday night, we're in New York. Bruce Springsteen is playing next door in the Meadowlands indoor arena. He's there for like 14 nights or something. And he's actually playing the night that we're there. So we went, obviously. We went to the gig, and it was a good weekend. And it was a total coincidence that Bruce happened to be there that weekend. But no, I mean, mate, I've been a fan of his for many years, and there's a lot of people that don't understand him, that don't know what he's about. But I'm one of those fans that have been there since the old days. So I'm still a big fan, and hopefully I get the chance to see him pretty soon when everyone gets back to normal.
It's been an absolute pleasure, John. I'm going to leave you with this final quote from you, which it doesn't involve referees' testicles. It doesn't involve pointing a gun at Dwight Yorke. It's this one. I think it really sums up kind of why we all love this football club. There's an aura about this club, a sense of history and tradition. Even the name is beautifully symmetrical with 5 letters in each word. So for all the stuff that you've been spouting off down the years, you're capable of a bit of poetry as well, I think, aren't you? It's really nails it for me, that does.
Yeah, listen, that's how I felt about the place, and will always feel about the place. You know, when I look at it, and I look at it now, I mean, crikey, you know, since our stadium always used to be so immaculate, everything about it. You know, if a coat hook came off in the dressing room on a Saturday afternoon, by Sunday morning it had been replaced, it had been fixed. You know, everything about that club, and you look at it now, and it's it's such an amazing place. You know, I hope that it will continue to stay as it is. You know, you don't need to change any of the stands, or I know there's talk about maybe changing the north stand, but don't take away the beauty of the place, because it's a place of beauty as well. It's actually a beautiful old stadium, and it's exceptionally well maintained. And I would just be glad when obviously the fans can go back and fill up all those empty seats again, and get the place rocking, mate. I've been there when it's been rocking, and it's an awesome place to be when everything's going well. So hopefully that will happen very soon, Matt.
Oh, listen, it's been an absolute privilege speaking to you.
Welcome,
at such length about you, all of your kind of many years at Aston Villa. So listen, you've been watching,
good memories which will never leave me. So I shall enjoy them long into my retirement, which is coming in about 20 years' time.
Well, thanks so much for your time. You've been watching Claret and Blue with me, Matt Kendrick, and the legend, former player, former coach, former manager, John Gregory. Until next time, up the Villa.
All right, mate. God bless you.
Thank you for listening to Claret and Blue, an Aston Villa podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please do let us know. We love hearing your feedback. We'll be back soon with another episode, but until then, up the Villa.